Hello and welcome to the Nash Tackle Off the Hook podcast. Just to make you aware, this podcast may contain some explicit/offensive language, and if that's not your thing, you don't have to listen, but I have given you a warning. I hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
You don't know the half of it, but anyway. I'm skating on the thinnest ice known to man.
He said, and they put a poison in the tank that just instantly kills them. He went, and we've run out of it, so we cut their heads off with shovels.
Suddenly, bang! The whole boat exploded.
Take your sort of 8-inch long piranha and imagine that at 4, 5, maybe 6 feet.
I said, I've revived your dead fish. F off, he said. You haven't.
That was just humongous. It was, I couldn't believe what I was looking at.
I'm just battling this fish out in the pond. I know it's a black man. I'm saying I'll never be a naughty boy again.
If you catch fish and you return them to the water, then you are my brother.
I can't believe I'm about to say this, but Chris Yates, welcome to the Nash podcast. How are you, Chris?
I am well. I'm very well because I'm watching this pigeon in the wood. Just can you see it?
I can see the pigeon in the wood.
We're looking over Hugh Miles's garden, and there's a pigeon looking at us, looking at him.
And we've just had a special lunch thanks to Sue. That was good, wasn't it?
It was a delicious lunch, and it was only meant to be half an hour, and then we were meant to have started this little chat maybe 3 hours ago. That's how long the lunch was taken. So we've exhausted all the material. There's nothing else to say. We've been just talking fish, talking birds, talking. Oh, let us not say everything we've been talking about, but
we'll divulge some more in due course.
Yes. But it was a good lunch. But that's all we can say.
Very good.
And the pigeon has flown away. That's all I was waiting for. When the pigeon flies away, we start to talk. It's flown.
That's good. I like these signs of nature that are work.
It's an omen.
This is good. We'll talk about omens and all that stuff in due course. But I have to say, Chris, it's a massive honour, and I mean that in every true sense of the word, to be sat with you talking, and probably the most surreal 2 hours of my life, having had lunch with you in a very, very good way. I cannot thank you enough for coming on, mate. And genuinely, I'm very much looking forward to the next however long that we chat. So thank you, Chris.
Well, it's good and pleasure to meet you too. And I was very pleased to know through Hugh that you're a tennis fan and that you play tennis because this is Wimbledon as we have this conversation. This is Wimbledon fortnight. We're in the middle of one of the best sporting fortnights of the in the sporting calendar, and I'm here, and we're probably missing a great match. I do tend to get sort of carried away with some matches, like last night's match. God, it's a fantastic match.
Djokovic, good.
Djokovic, and the match before was Alcaraz. Did you see that?
Yeah, that was a good game as well.
Yes,
and Sinner, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yes, Yannick Sinner and Alcaraz, who's 19, and I'd booked him to get in the final.
Had you?
Yeah, I really thought he'd been unbeaten, just the same as Tim van Rijnhoven.
Oh, he's your favourite though, isn't he?
Yeah.
You backed him big.
I backed him to get into the final with Djokovic, but unfortunately they played yesterday and Djokovic won. But anyway, so yeah.
Rumour has it.
But the fact that you are a tennis, you too play tennis, and you know the circuit much better than I do. But I just used to love, July, strawberries, tennis. I used to live not far away from Wimbledon, you see.
You know, both you and Hugh, when we were talking and having lunch, you've had some incredible lives and you've achieved some incredible things. And we're going to talk through all of that, or try and conceptualise all of that. But the first thing that I wanted to talk to you about, Chris, is your personality. I'm going to call you are a maverick. You're so much an original, but also you are so in tune, it seems, with nature, the seasons, what's going on. Where does all that sort of come from? Any idea?
Well, yeah, just because I grew up in a nice bit of country. It was the edge of suburbia, or it is the edge of suburbia now. It wasn't then. It was, the countryside sort of began where I was living, and I was allowed, in the days when kids would just wander off on their own. And I just used to see stuff. There was, before I even really discovered the pond, I discovered, the heath and, my first lizard. It was like a jewel in the heather, this what the hell is that thing? It was this little dinosaur. I'd seen dragons, in my storybooks, but this was a little dragon, and it was on some heather, and it looked just a jewel. And that things like that it just send me off on one, and I become completely obsessed by reptiles. And then I found the pond, and there was stuff in the pond, sticklebacks, tadpoles, and nothing much else. It was always a bit too green and a bit too grey to see far into. It was a very it was clay.
Yeah.
Probably not even half an acre. And then as I wrote, the pigeons come back.
That's an omen.
That's an omen, because I've got to my best point of my childhood. I was 5 and this, I wasn't 5 when I saw my first carp. I was probably 4. It was 5 when I saw my first captive carp, but I was 4 when I saw my first carp, which was when they were spawning. I didn't realise that these things existed, and the lake, the pond erupted. The carp were spawning. They were wildies. Probably the biggest that lived in the pond was probably 5-6 pounds, and I just saw. And to my 4-year-old eyes, they were dragons. It was. I'd found a horde of dragons, and no one believed me when I told them about it. And then when we found, it must have been a year later, we found an old man fishing in the corner by the willows. It was a lovely spot then. It's not the same now. The pond's still there, but the place has changed. And he had something in the net. And luckily my father was with me, because I wouldn't have gone up to him and said, "What you caught, mister?" I didn't know that term. And I was far too shy to have to kind of interrupt him. He looked so completely lost in his world. Pipe, rod on rest, sitting on a wicker creel, obviously a cane rod, and he had this keep net in quite shallow water, and when it went out into that deeper part where it stretched, you could see something stirring in it. And could you ask him what he's got in the net? And my dad went up and said, "Could we see what you have in your net?" And he kind of. He looked a bit grumpy, but he sort of leaned forward and he just lifted and there's this, it was one of those dragons that I'd seen the previous year. And I said, "What is it?" "Carp." That's all he said. Carp. And that word echoed for years in my head. Carp, even more than, lizards and snakes. I'd seen a carp. And that was going to be my ambition for the rest of my life. I wanted to have a carp in a net. I wanted to catch a carp. I wanted to feel it. I wanted that physical connection with it. And so that's where it's all come from. Just seeing stuff, walking around, birds, squirrel. Yeah, we used to have red squirrels. I remember seeing a red squirrel being chased by a grey squirrel. This was 51, 52, chased up a tree, and thinking, I really like that one that's being chased. I don't like the look of the one who's doing the chasing. It's far too aggressive. And it was actually, he was going to try and catch it and kill it, because it was when the greys were beginning to outdo the reds were beginning to outdo the reds. But anyway, so I remember those moments vividly, and that's where it's all come from.
That moment, just seeing that carp, those spawning, and that fish that man had caught. Wow. It's fair to say that your lifestyle, especially now, obviously we're going to talk about your writing and sort of various other aspects that we've probably seen you in or heard of you in. But in terms of a day in the life of Chris Yates at the moment, it's fair to say that your sort of lifestyle is not your atypical. What does it look like? What's a normal day, Chris?
Chaotic. There is a kind of routine, and there are certain things, I'm mid-70s now. I'm in my mid-70s, so I'm aware that I must make sure when in your 20s, you don't necessarily need to look after yourself, because your body's doing that for you in a way, which can be dangerous if you really do neglect yourself and get onto the too much beer and all the rest of it. But in your mid-70s, you've got to be a bit more careful. So I do a kind of yoga routine, and I do this ball game, which I've invented myself. The ball game, which has now appeared on.
You're world famous. We're going to talk about it.
Yeah, on a certain company's video. Yeah, the ball game is very important. It's only a 5-minute round I have every morning, but it gets the circulation going, and that gets my head working. I need my head to start working, imaginatively. I need to be able to see things, visualize things, And so when everything's brighter, then I have my breakfast. And
So
then
the ball game's first.
Yeah, the ball game is first, and then the yogas follow. It's just a quick route. It's a very basic yoga, but I again, it's only 10 minutes. But everything's flowing in me. My heart's beating, blood's flowing. By the end of this sort of 15-minute routine, and sometimes when it's a day I just want to get on, I don't think to myself, no, I can't be asked. I do it. I know that I feel better by doing that. So unless I'm going to meet somebody and the alarm clock hasn't worked, and my alarm clock doesn't work very well, so then I have to scrub that. So but mostly I start like that. I have a really nice pot of tea, and then perhaps half an hour later I have another really nice pot of tea. So that's 2 pots of tea, 4 cups of tea, and some really nice toast, and that I have to have that. That's a ritual, the tea ritual. So it's 11 o'clock by the time things are going, and then I'll open my notebook and I look at what I wrote last night, and I'm writing this book, which was a follow up to Night Walk, which has done very well. But that was 10 years ago, and this book was commissioned on the back of Night Walk, and that's 10 years, and it was meant to be 2 years in the delivery of. And it's 3/4 of the way finished. So I've got to be thinking about that. And then I get a call from my eldest boy, maybe Alex. You've got to get down here now. The goshawks will be fledging. He lives near the New Forest, and he knows about goshawks. And goshawks are spectacular hawks. They're the biggest of the hawks, really. And they are they're incredible to watch. But you've got to be. How he finds them. If you just say, I want to go and see a goshawk, I'm going to find one, you never would. He's like I was with carp. Yeah. He can find goshawks in places that seem absolutely impossible. Jungles, dense jungle of pine and oak and hazel, and he knows where the places are, and every place he's taken me to, we either hear them or we see them. And I remember. And I was so excited about when he first took me to see not the display, which is a wonderful thing to see in early spring. I wanted to see the fledged birds being fed by the parents. He said, you wouldn't believe what they bring in for them. Live squirrels, live magpies, a hare. One brought in the hare. Big hare. Yeah, I think it was a leveret, but all these. I wanted to see it, and so I went the day he had available, because he's a busy boy. He's a physio. He's got his own gym. Right. Yeah. He's got some very loyal clients, because he keeps them going. A lot of people. Anyway, so we went on this day, and it was the 16th of June, and it was the 40th anniversary of the bishop. Wow. And I've not told anybody this story, because I want to put it down in writing somewhere. One day I will. But I thought that would be a crazy thing to do on the 40th anniversary of my biggest carp. Go and watch goshawks. Yeah, of course. That's what you do. That's what you do. So we went and we waited an hour. I said, "Are you sure this is the spot?" He said, we cannot enter the wood. We have to be on the edge. They're so sharp. He said, it's just like stalking a carp, but a carp with the most incredible eyesight, and they've got incredible hearing too. Crack a twig and they're gone. So we've got to go so gently to the edge. We've got to stalk. You stalk a goshawk, and then it may be 150 yards away, the nest, in this dense bit of block of Douglas fir or pine or whatever it is they're in. There'll be one big nest, sort of 3/4 of the way up a tree, and we could hear them. And he said, I can hear from the calls. You could hear the female, you could hear the male, you could hear where the young were, and my hearing is not as good as it used to be. I could hear them, but I couldn't get the direction. He said, that one's over there, and it's got to be a good distance away, and that one is on the right, and there's one that's just left the nest. So if we go round to where that one went, we can probably find it, and I can show you a goshawk. So we went round, and sure enough, it was in this tree, in this this absolutely dense bit of woodland, and it saw us straight away, and it wasn't one of the fledged ones. It flew off, calling as it went. And then suddenly all hell broke out. It was just coincidence. We went into the middle of this wood, and we were creeping. You know, we could have been stalking carp.
Yeah.
We could have been stalking a big wily chub or something like that. We were just, oh, mind that twig. Don't put your foot on that twig. It was that kind of thing. So we were being, you know, if I had a Mark IV in my hand, it would all come back to me. But anyway, there's just this noise, and then suddenly the female came in of the pair. We hadn't seen the male yet. The female came in, and she was carrying a squirrel which was alive, and she was gripping it, and obviously, you know, iron grip, and she dropped it on the nest, and immediately the 3 fledged goshawks who all had, you know, they could fly, but they knew that they were going to get fed if they stayed near the nest, and they all went for this poor squirrel, and the noise was like rending metal. It was, and then the male came in with a magpie.
Wow.
And so, you know, there was all this going on, and I thought, this is a good way to I mean, it was barbaric in a way, and it was terrifying if you're, you know,
if you're a squirrel,
or a magpie or a rabbit or something like that. But it was an incredible sight. And I thought that's quite an interesting way to spend my anniversary day, my 40th anniversary
day.
You
won't forget it, will you? But I'm guessing the reason that he's so adept with regards to nature is because I'm guessing you've given a similar sort of childhood to him, where he's out in nature.
Oh yeah, they
shared that wisdom with regards to it all
from right from the very moment they could walk on their own. They came with me, all 4 of my kids, and we would do it every day. We would go out somewhere every day, as long as I wasn't fishing for, you know, like a week on end, which I had to do when they were very small, because that's when we were making passion for angling, which was really hard to leave them. But anyway, yes. So I mean, we've got lovely country all around us.
Yeah,
and they would have their camps, and they wouldn't tell me where the camps were, and I'd have to be tracking them to find where they were going. And yeah, so yeah, they're all 4 of them. They're 2 girls, 2 boys, and they just love nature. They love the hills. They love the sounds and the smells, and they love the creatures. They all have this, and they're all in different things. Alex, as I said, is a physio, and William, my youngest boy, he's but I say youngest, he's 31 now, 32. He's 32 now, and he will be next week.
32 next week.
Yeah. And he's a musician, a very talented multi-instrumentalist. He can play virtually. Friend of mine said, "You don't know anybody who like this banjo?" It was a really good banjo. She said, "It's quite difficult to play." I said, "Yeah, I know someone."
I know a chap.
And within a week, he was doing proper finger picking. You know, and it was like a hillbilly. He was playing like a hillbilly, and yet you can play a violin, a cello. His piano is just fluid, and as for the guitar, it's he can play guitar like I always wanted to play guitar.
Yeah.
So that's his living. He does. He's got vinyls coming out, cassette coming out. You know, he works with quite as a session musician. He works with some quite famous people, and so but he could do it on his own. My youngest is a primary school teacher, and that's tough. But she just always wanted to be a teacher.
Yeah,
she's very good at communication, at keeping. She loves getting youngsters excited about stuff. Like, you know, I mean, she wants to be a mum, I think, eventually.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's hard being a teacher nowadays because the way they've changed education has made it very difficult to use to employ your imagination like we were able to when we were a bit younger. It's hard. So but she does it. She manages it, and she loves her work. But it's exhausting. And my eldest, she's like she just snaps her fingers and things happen. She's just Camilla. She works for a small independent agency that was small when she joined, and since she joined, it's become quite a big and very much more successful advertising agency.
So they're all successful, and by the sounds of it, the apples haven't fallen too far from the tree.
Yeah, no, they all do things in their own way. All they're each one of them is individual. Even Alex, with his routines, with his gym, with which all the equipment, all that stuff that people sort of seem to think is important, and is important for for injuries. I mean, you'd know about injuries. Having told me he's done his knees into skateboarding and over the years, and but he still likes to work he's very good with people. He knows how to get them to respond, and he knows, and which is why he gets them repaired. He gets them to repair themselves. Very quickly. He's got a lovely manner. So they're
Do they angle any of them? Do they
interesting.
fish?
They always say, when are we going fishing? When are we going fishing? And every summer comes along. We'll have a day summer. We just don't do it now, but they always used to. But they're not. They love walking around rivers, walking along rivers or around a lake or something like that. But no, it's not. It's not important to them to actually to fish. But they love the idea that we will go fishing again soon.
Yeah.
So that's always on the agenda. But it never quite happens because there's always too many other things to do.
Yeah, lots to do indeed. So for you, with regards to sort of now and your fishing, and I'm going to start at this point, is there any fishing anymore, Chris? Or is fishing no longer?
Yeah, fishing is no longer the passion that it used to be. No, it's still there. I come in and I see one of my favourite rods in the corner of the room. I see my net set up. Everything's ready. Everything's there. I look at a float that has a real history, and I look at that and I'll turn it over in my head. I remember that day, when that went down in that long pool where the big perch were, and I feel that solid thump of a big perch, which I'm hoping is going to be a 3-pounder. Or I remember that rod bending to that 20-pound common I got from the lake just down in the wood. That was a great day. So all these memories, they're all there, and it's like I just need to touch this stuff, and it works on me like a charm. It's like Aladdin's lamp. I don't have to go far. I pick up one of the old items, a reel, the reel that Don Delaney gave me, the man who stocked the carp into Redmire, a 4-inch aerial, 1922, and I just spin it, and I put the check on, and it stops, and that sound, and and I've had so many good fish on that reel. Caught my first barbel. Got some big carp from Redmire on that reel, and
Donald Leaney gave you the reel.
Yeah, and he gave me and he because I used to see him when I used to live near Haslemere in Surrey. Actually, I lived in Hampshire. I was on the Hampshire-Surrey border, and I discovered that he lived in Haslemere because he wrote me a letter when I caught the 50-pound carp.
The bishop.
He just wrote this letter and just said, "Very glad to hear that." Some of my brood are still making the headlines. It was just such a lovely letter, and you should try a piece of this. And he sent me some special corn that he'd found because he'd heard that it was caught on sweet corn. This was within the week of me catching the fish, and he said, he said, little birds told me that you live only 3 miles away. Come over for tea. No. And it was a lovely invitation.
Did you go over?
Of course, yeah.
You've got to,
I got on my bicycle and I'd cycled over on my old 1911 policeman's bike. It's a Hercules policeman's bike. It's a fantastic old bike, and he was delighted to see the bike not when I arrived, but when we left, because I just knocked on the door, and his keeper, Mrs. Packham, came to the door and said, "Are you Mr. Yates?" I said, "I am Mr. Yates." "Sir's waiting for you. Would you like tea? I've made a cake." And she was lovely, very kind of, no nonsense.
Yeah, sounded it.
Go down the end, and his office is on the end, the door on the left. And then I got to the door, and I opened the door. He said, "Step!" I said, "Further step!" And he was very, because he used to be a colonel.
Yeah.
Was he a colonel? I think he was a colonel. And no, major. He was a major. He was major leady during the D-Day. He was very active on that dreadful day. He lost. He didn't want to talk about it. He said, I never want to live that day again.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was a great character.
Yeah.
Great character. And I would go to see him at least once every fortnight for tea.
Oh.
Mrs. Packham, I was going to say Packham. Yes, she would make a cake every time, and it was always the same kind of slab cake. She said, "I've got slab cake."
Slab cake.
Which it was slab. It was just a slab.
Dense.
And it didn't matter. And it didn't matter that sometimes the tea was like treacle. It was so brewing for so long. Because we would just start talking about carp, and he would tell me about Redmire in the early days and the other lakes he used to stock in the 30s, and then about his education and about his childhood, and about how he became obsessed with the natural world. And he went Eton, and then he went to I can say he went to Eton, and he went to Stockton.
That is some
It's a bit of a, then he went to New College, Oxford. That's where he went to do biology, and then decided he'd like to work in fish breeding after the end of the First World War, that period, in the 20s and 30s, and that's where he came from.
And the rest is history. So exactly that way. You talked there about tackle. For you, even, I mean, it's renowned and historic on the passion videos, etc. You're not one for the latest and greatest of fishing tackle, split cane, an old reel, free lining. That style, watching a flow, is very much reminiscent with you, and a bit of sweet corn, obviously, which we'll talk about in due course. But any reason why that has always been that way, and it's not become buzzers, bolt rigs, etc., etc., etc.?
It goes right back to my first days fishing. Simplicity. I learned fairly. It's a bit bewildering to start with when you want to fish and you haven't got anybody you know. I didn't realise when I first wanted to fish that my next door neighbour was an angler, but I got a little guidebook from the library, fishing, and then there was another little book I bought in the local corn stores, fishing, for youngsters, so I gathered what I could from those books, but it was just too complicated. I just wanted to go down there. I knew that I had to get a worm, and I knew I had to tie a hook onto a bit of line, and I had to, I went to the local toy shop actually. They did a few bits of proper fishing tackle, but nothing serious. And I bought this for my birthday money for 7 and 6. I bought this rod, which was like 3 bits of cane, and it was the picture on the card that the bits of cane weren't mounted on. It was the illustration that did it for me. In the first illustration, it was a triptych. There were three images of a boy fishing in a river, and he was looking at his line. There wasn't a float. He was just looking at his line, and there was reeds around him. And then the next image, the line was tightening. You could see it was tightening. The rod tip was going. The rod was on the rest. And then in the third one, the grand finale, he was heaving this enormous fish through the air. And I just thought, wow, I want to do that. And it was a carp-shaped fish. Right. And, if it had been real, if it had been a photograph, it would have been maybe a 6-pounder coming through the air towards him, which he was about to catch like a rugby ball. I thought, that's brilliant. I want that, 7 and 6. So I bought this rod, and it was a stiff old thing. It did have a bit of action in the tip, but and I bought a reel to go with it, which was about 3 shillings, I think. And I went to the local pond, Borough Heath Pond, which is about 5 minutes walk from home, and I fished, and nothing happened.
Yeah.
And nothing was ever going to happen, I thought, because I had seen people. I'd seen the old man catch the carp. That was some years before. I was 11, by the way, so this is 6 years has gone. Yeah, 6 years, and I've only just fished. I didn't dare to start with. I mean, how could you sort of pit your wits against one of those monsters? Yeah, and that fish in the keep net had to be 4 pounds. I mean, it was a colossal creature. Yeah. So all this was going through my mind, and I knew I wasn't capable of catching a carp. I just wanted one of the fish that I had seen some of the older boys catch, little silverfish. I didn't know what they were. I thought, yeah, one of those would do, and I didn't get one. But eventually, I got a proper rod, and some proper advice by my next door neighbour, who I discovered was a fisherman. An angler, because I started. He saw me with the rod, and I was telling him what I'd been doing, and he said, "Oh no, you can't do it like that. You can't just flick it out." And the float was lying flat. I didn't know about weights, and it was probably up in the way off the bottom. Yeah. And he said, there's gudgeon in that pond. No, I didn't know about a gudgeon. He says, yeah, you need the bait on the bottom. So anyway, he gave me all this advice and said, rod's a bit stiff for a gudgeon, and get your dad to get you some finer line. This line's is probably 15-pound line, 20 for a gudgeon, and some smaller hooks. Anyway, my dad went to the local sports shop, got me the stuff, and the next day my neighbour came down. I watched him coming down the lawn in his garden with a rod in his hand, and I thought, that's a nice rod. And then I suddenly thought, I knew he was going to give it to me. he had that, you know, he was walking and he had a bit of a smile, a bit of a twinkle in his eye, and he came and he handed the rod over the garden fence. He said, "Yeah, Christopher, this is for you. I know you're going to be a good fisherman because you've got it in you. You're completely I can't remember the word. Something like you're completely wrapped up in it, aren't you? You just want to fish. That's all you want to do." And he'd recognised that from that first meeting, that one chat. And he wanted me to have a rod. It would increase my chances. So I went that day to fish. You know, it was just so exciting, and I knew what to do. My dad had got me a finer line. I was using a size 12.
Right.
Size 12 hook to gut, you know, so a tiny little hook compared with the ones I had been using. But that was going to be good enough. And a worm and a float. And I bought some shot with splits in. Wow. You could put over the line, and then and I thought you had to tie a knot. No one had told me. You had to squeeze it. No, I had to tie a knot. So I literally knotted them on the line, and it made my float sit up just enough. And I cast it out, maybe 10 minutes. Float goes down, strike, and there was, I could feel that it was that visceral. I could feel it in my chest. It was tugging. I could feel it through the rod, and I was reeling it in. And you could see it splashing, and it was coming, and it was one of those. What did he call them? Guds, and scuds. and it was in my hand, and I carefully took the hook out. I was careful not to get overexcited and injure it. And I brought a jam jar. We had a pond in our garden.
Of course,
which had just been dug, and I held it up, and I got on my bicycle and I cycled a mile home, and I was the proudest boy on the planet. And we watched it disappear into the depths in the pond with the goldfish. So that was how it all began.
Mad, a gudgeon. What a first fish. Yeah. On a float, a split cane. Any reason why that, over the years that you fished, with everything you've done and achieved and the fish you caught, we'll talk about the Bishop and Redmire in due course, but any reason why those methods, that simplicity, that whole aspect of angling didn't change to more modern materials?
Because it was so effective.
Yeah.
Because the more I fished, the more I observed, the more I sort of tuned in to what was happening. Was always that was the what's the word? That was the level I needed to be on. It wasn't anything to do with tackle. It wasn't. I mean, obviously you had to have decent tackle,
enough to land. The fish.
Yeah. But there is a word, and it's just flown out of my head. When you're thinking about things in a chronological way, what's the most important thing?
Yeah,
it's that.
So the most logical aspect.
Yeah. There is a word that conveys exactly what I'm thinking of, and it's not coming to my head because it's saying no. You're doing this official talk, and I'm not playing this game.
I'm not doing it.
You can only do this if you're scribbling in your notebook. It comes straight away. This is slightly artificial, so I'm not going to play. Anyway, the idea was the simplicity that I needed when I was young.
Yeah.
I thought, why should I change? I know what I'm doing. Keep it simple, and then you don't have to think about it. Then all you need to think about, priority. That's the word. I needed to prioritize the simplicity, because that way you're concentrating on the most important thing, which is the fish. And you know that if you can get a bait to it, doesn't matter how, as long as the fish doesn't know that it's you that's brought the bait to it, it'll take the bait. That was it. So it was so simple, and I didn't need anything. I've caught one of the biggest carp just with a line and a hook. Nice. And most of my big carp have been caught with a line and a hook, and nothing on the line, and all within a flick of the bank. I love the closest. I have caught carp up to the incredible range of 60 yards. I know people will laugh at that, but because it's so piddly. But no, the closer I am to the fishing, the more excited I used to get and would still get if I still fished like that. But I haven't been fishing that much recently because of this book that I'm writing at the moment, which I really have to try and finish in the next sort of year. And so that's taken me. The fishing's taken a bit of a back seat, which I don't mind. And I know that when I do fish, if I fish again in that with that same focus, that same intensity, I won't have changed. It's only I want to fish in the simplest way possible. I don't want the bother apart from anything else. I hate all the setting up. I want to just chuck some stuff in the bag,
Go.
Get in the car, get on my bike, and just go. And I don't want to think about the preparation. That's gets in the way. I want to keep that vision clear in my head. The main purpose of going fishing is to communicate with this. It would be like here. I want to communicate with this place. It's your means of communication. The line is your connection. Maybe you won't connect with a fish, but you're communicating with that environment, and you are with it. You have become part of it. And once you're part of it, that's it. You're done. You can just sit back.
I love that, mate. Yeah, and it's very reminiscent of a lot of, like, when we're talking about day to day for you. It is quite. Some days are quite reactionary. You might get a call from your son to go and see some bird life. You might get a friend offer you to go for whatever it may be. You'll go in the same way with your angling. If that takes you, or there's a sign from a certain wheelbarrow in your garden. Is this correct?
Yeah, that's right.
If there's a sign from a wheelbarrow in the garden, then you'll get the rods. You haven't got to worry about the prep that is the modern day carp angler, and you can go and angle. Talk to me about the wheelbarrow.
Yeah, actually, the wheelbarrow did once lead to my biggest perch in a kind of a way. Yeah, because there was a kind of a moment of indecision, and I was. I always look at the wheelbarrow in the morning. It's an old wheelbarrow that's been in the same place for nearly 30 years. Under an ivy-clad wall. It hasn't moved for 30 years, so it's full of water. It's full of twigs and leaves, leaf mould, and the birds come every day to bathe in it, and they drink from it. And I look at it sometimes when I'm waiting for my tea to brew. You've got to give your tea a proper 4 minutes to brew.
Is it different? We need to talk tea as well.
Yeah. But
that's important.
But anyway, so I've got a 4-minute pause. Sometimes I'll play the piano for 4 minutes. It's important, I just find a chord or a little phrase, and that's important. But if I'm not playing the piano and trying to find the phrase, which is the phrase of the day, it's the signature phrase of the day. It's probably quite a slow, sort of simple little tune, and I just lift it at the end, or I might just turn it into a minor key at the end, and I just slow it down. That's where I'm going. But with the birds, I'm waiting for a particular bird, say, or an odd combination, say a blackbird and a thrush and a wren. They all come together, and I think, what's that telling me? And I obviously sometimes I just make it up, but sometimes I don't have to think about it, because it was this day, and a wren. I seen a wren splashing around the edge, and it was hunting for insects down the far side of the wheelbarrow, and it was picking them off. It was winter, but it was a mild kind of late winter.
Yeah,
so almost spring like. It was getting towards the end of February, beginning of March. It's a nice time. Something's in the air, and then another bird came in, and that was a thrush. So I had a wren and a thrush, and I said, it had lovely sort of streaking on the breast, and I thought, right, and what I want to see now is I was thinking of the streaking made me think of perch, because I was thinking of the stripes, something vividly marked, and because I was going to go barbel fishing, but and because it was mild, I was also thinking I might go and see if I can catch a sort of late winter tench, which on a local pond, which is not something I would do, but it had that feel. I might go tench fishing at a little pond, and then suddenly this incredibly flashy bird came in, and it was a gold crest, which are tiny little things, but they got this lovely bright gold crest on the top of the top. It's a stripe. It is a definite stripe. And it was flicking about and had a little splash, and the other bird sort of stepped back and said, God, you're a bit of a flash, Harry. And and it was tiny, and it was even smaller than a wren. And then it suddenly, they were all gone. Something disturbed it. Probably a blackbird came in, or a hawk went over, and they went. That decided I'm going perch fishing.
Perch fishing.
Yeah, and I caught my best perch that day.
Did you? From the wheelbarrow?
From the wheelbarrow pushed me the direction. I had an invitation. I have to tell the truth. I had been thinking about the other ones, but I knew my mate Kev was going.
Yeah,
he's going to this pond, and it wasn't a river. The rivers were out of order; they were flooded. So he'd said, because the river's out of order, I'm going to go to a pond, which is why I was thinking about tench anyway.
Okay,
but he said, no, perch. We're going perch fishing. I said, but yeah. So
how big was this perch?
It was 3 pounds 11 ounces.
Yeah, that'll do.
So I've never had a 4 pounder, but 3.11 will do. Yeah.
Everybody will be getting a wheelbarrow, and filling it up with water and watching birds.
And watching the birds. Yeah.
You've got to be that in tune. Talk to me about tea. That is important. And you told me something. You said 4 minutes, but you also said it's a combination of teas.
Yeah.
Carp anglers drink a lot of tea.
Yeah.
What's the Chris Yates tea of choice?
Yeah. Carp anglers, and in fact, and I have to confess, I myself also drink the kind of tea that most carp anglers drink when they're fishing. You take, for the convenience sake, you take tea bags. I will never use tea bags at home because you need a proper teapot, a china teapot, and you need proper tea, and you don't get proper tea in a tea bag. You get the scrapings off the floor. The real tea goes in the loose, the packets of loose tea, leaf tea, and my tea is Earl Grey, and it's also Assam. It can be a Ceylon tea, but which I think is Assam is as an Indian tea, and it's but it's got a bit more bite than the sort of standard Ceylon tea. But anyway, so I don't put a lot of the Assam in my caddy. I have a tin, a nice little tea tin, and I put about 40% Assam, and the rest is Earl Grey, or 30% Assam. It's very particular. It's got
this is 70-30 split.
70-30 split. And shake the caddy, open it, 2 big spoonfuls in the teapot, having put boiling water in first, and then empty that water out because you've got to get the teapot nice and hot.
Yeah, you've got to warm the pot.
Yeah, got to warm the pot. And then I put that on, and I put a big tea cozy over it, and I give it 4 minutes exactly, and that is. And sometimes in the morning you can hear me going, that is good. And that's my day is done then. That first cup of tea. And I always have to have the same. I can't just have any old toast. I've got to have the toast I get from this fabulous stores just down the road, little post office stores. It's homemade bread. It's not homemade, but it's a little tiny bakery they get this stuff from. It's
what type of bread is it?
It's called almost wholemeal sourdough. God. And it makes the toast. Anyone who comes in my house when it's that time in the morning when it's the first smell of the day, toast, they go, what's that smell? Have you got a stove going? What kind of wood are you burning on your stove? No, it's the toast. Can we, if it's we or if it's I, can I have some of that toast? No,
you can't.
No, this is my special bread. You're not having that. And then of course I might make them a slice. And I have that, and I have that with a really nice, not very sweet marmalade. It's just perfect. With my cup of tea. So that's the third ritual. So it's
ball game,
bit of yoga, and then tea and toast.
And specific toast and specific 70-30 split of tea. Yeah. That's the carpiest morning routine I've ever heard. And
there I've just said, I don't like anything complicated about. I don't want to. I want to get straight on with the day, and I have to have these little things to do. Otherwise, I know the day isn't going to unfold properly.
Is that what it is? If it doesn't go to that order, you think the days is there that sort of almost superstition element in it?
Yeah, and maybe it's old age. You get a bit sort of pernickety about stuff, and I'm not pernickety because you just have to walk into my house and see that I'm not pernickety. It's complete chaos. But I know where everything is. I can even tell you, one of the rods I haven't used maybe for 10 years, and I'm going to use again one day, a roach rod or something like that. I haven't fished for roach for 10 years now.
Wow.
But I know where that rod is.
You think when this book is out the way and done, that the fishing buzz will be back, or that thirst to go will be back, or?
Yeah, I'm open to suggestions from that side of my head. Who wants to go fishing? Because I dream this morning. In fact, I still keep a dream diary. I've been keeping a dream diary for 60 years now.
You've kept a dream diary for 60 years?
Yeah, I mean, there's a pile. It's probably 6 foot high now, and no one will ever look at it, but I look at it again. I can go back 50 years, say. The first ones was pretty scrappy bits of writing, but I can go back 50 years, and I read the first line of a dream I had 50 years ago, and I don't need to read anymore. It's like save. You write it in the dream diary, save. And then you read the first line, and I can tell you what's going to happen there. And some of the dreams are 6 pages long. They're like mini novels and sort of great adventures and lots of fishing. And this morning I was fishing a lake had been taken by somebody I didn't know. Could have been you. We have never met. We've never met. And he did look a bit like you, curiously. Yeah, dark haired and sort of
bit dodgy.
Yeah, a bit dodgy.
Slightly annoying.
Yeah, kept talking. Wouldn't stop talking about fishing. No, you. If it was you, but it was someone. It was someone of your mould. It was interesting. And you were saying, or he was saying, that in the lily pads on the far side. I said, but this bay here with the reeds, look, that reed just moved. Yeah, that's not a carp. I said, that's a tench. The tench were always said, no, I'm sure that's a carp. And that's how the dream started.
Wow.
So it was like a competition. I was going to prove that was a carp. And no, they're all over there that you're going to have to cast a long way. No, I'm going to cast under my rod.
That sounds like me getting it wrong. Don't worry, Chris.
Anyway, and so I'm still dreaming about fishing.
Wow. I can't believe you keep a dream diary that's been 60 years. That is crazy.
I mean, maybe a month will go by and there won't be one worth recording, just little scraps of, a snatch of conversation or something. But if it's a really good adventure, and some of them are, I could turn it into a novel if I wanted to. So one or two of them, I think they're good enough. But of course, I never will. But and people would laugh at me if I said I was going to do that. But they've got a lot of material that when I'm writing my descriptive stuff, a lot of material when I'm thinking that reminds me of course, I have seen this before in a dream. Wow. And like my winter book, there's 1 or 2 moments now which have more or less been lifted out of my dream diary because I'm trying to describe the feeling I get when I see what has now become my passion. I've discovered in the same way that I discovered carp, I've discovered another creature which has hit me just as hard. And that's why I'm not really... I'm not minded that I'm not fishing as much now. I still go into my favourite rivers and favourite lakes just to have a wander around. I still love the sort of sense I get of the place, the presence of the place. But this other creature has got me literally by the throat. It's a hen harrier.
A hen harrier?
Yeah, which they only come down in the winter. They come down from the north and they winter down here. And then in the spring they fly north.
Yeah.
And they're under threat because they fly, a lot of them go to sort of, they love open country, like grouse moors.
Okay.
And the grouse poppers pop the hen harriers because the hen harriers are bird catchers as much as mouse catchers.
Grouse,
yeah. And so they're in trouble. But I've had a good winter this last winter.
Have you? What are we talking?
Maybe a dozen really good encounters, and that's a dozen in a whole winter.
Wow.
I'm only seeing probably the same. Say 4 birds over the winter. I've found each winter I know where they're going to go, and I keep it. I'm constantly going to the same kind of areas, and they always have a night roost. They come in and they spend the night on the ground or low down in a tree, in a scrubby area. But they're mostly hunting in open area. So you see this fabulous bird. It's the way they fly. They fly like owls, slow, completely buoyant, and yet effortless.
Yeah.
They're not like a buzzard, which is quite a heavy-winged bird.
You can see it.
They're not like a hawk, which is quick and darty. They're not like a peregrine, which is like a blade through the air.
Yeah.
They're just soft, and it's like you're in a dream especially when you watch the male, which is a real flash harry, sort of bright, sort of luminous white underneath, black tipped in the wings, white under the wings, and this beautiful face markings, and it just. They haven't sort of really got sort of. It's not the markings on the head. It's just the whole thing about the bird. It's the way they fly and the way you know it's a hen harrier. They've both got this white band on the buff of the tail.
Right.
The female is bigger than the male some way, and it's more. It's a gold brown, rusty brown, with lovely sort of bands on the breast and on the wings. But it's almost like a sort of a rear light. When you see it in the half light, when you're hunting, you see this white band going away from you, and you know that's a hen harrier. None of the other hawks, raptors have got that. So that's how I recognised my first one I saw. I said, what the hell is that? It just floated past me one November, late November evening. I'd been watching day-flying owls, short-eared owls.
Yeah.
And I thought, what is this? This isn't an owl, but it's flying like an owl. And it went by me. I thought, oh my God, what was that? And I thought it was, and I became totally obsessed just from that one encounter.
Just like the carp, really.
And just like, I've been following the carp. I've been in the wake of the carp for sort of 60 years. So it led me to all the other fish, but it's the carp that I've been following in a way.
Yeah.
And now it's the same thing. I'm following in the wake of that hen harrier. that first one.
Carps to birds. Wow. I didn't know that. Fair.
And it's this last last 10 years, I suppose. It's been getting every year, every winter, I get deeper into it. And that's why the book, which was just about the winter and the joys of winter, which was going to have quite a lot of winter fishing in. There's no winter fishing in it now.
You said no.
The fishing, the hunt, there's still hunt.
It's the bird.
I'm hunting for the bird. Yeah, and all the other good things about winter. I love the clarity of winter. Those. Yeah. Especially when you get those days that are completely still and frosty, and occasionally the snow comes. There's some good snow stories.
This would be nice on a winter's day. This big open window.
Yeah. You get
coming in,
and you'd be able to see right through the wood. Then everything closes up in the summer, which is great. I love that sort of sense of, it's a cozy feeling, isn't it? Here with all the foliage on the tree, but in the winter, and everything's sort of spare, and the light is very kind of bright, and yet the sounds are different. The sounds are completely different. You can hear things from a mile away, or you can in a place like this.
Your first carp, Chris. We've gone down a wormhole, which I've taken you down, apologies, round about tea and all sorts of other aspects. But you talked there about your sort of stumbling across carp, the obsession with them, wanting to sort of connect with them on your level. Your first actual successful carp hunt / encounter, where was that? What do you remember of that?
Oh, I've talked about it too long. I bet people who've read my first book, I was very careful to sort of try not to overdo it in my first book, which was Casting at the Sun.
Casting, it's a brilliant book.
Which, it was, and I'm there. I just need to sort of you asked me about my first carp. I'm there. I'm on the bank at Burrowheath Pond, where I caught my gudgeon. Yeah. But on the other side of the willows, away from the village. The village of Burrowheath was on. It's only, as I said, half an acre, maybe a bit more. The village is on one side, the heath is on the other, and the willows are between the village and the heath. So I'm on the other side of the willows, and I'm fishing in exactly the same place as that old boy. Yeah, and that was the great thing. I thought, this is it. I came back on. I was there. It was a breezy kind of March 21st, 1962, and I just knew. I had hooked a couple of carp. Had you? And lost them. Yeah. And that was, stupendous, just to feel their power. Each one of them took me into the willows, and one, the hook came out, the other one broke me. And there was a point in the pond, which I mentioned later on, but it's important that there was a tea gardens. But in the middle of the willows, there was like a clearing, and there was a lovely old cottage that backed onto the pond there, and that was the tea garden. And on the tiles, the red tiles of this old cottage, it just whitewashed teas. So when you were walking across the heath, you see this sign, teas. Oh, let's have a cup of tea. And these nice little, green painted tables and chairs. And you could sit down, and the tea lady would come out and serve you with tea. And for 2 and 6pence, you could fish there. And it was a place that the boys, the village boys, couldn't fish, and so you'd only get serious proper anglers. And you'd hear these tales. What? You had 3 carp in a day? And they were probably up to £3. And sometimes you'd hear this splashing. It was like dogs fighting in the tea gardens, and it was these carp that they were landing. And one day I'm going to fish the tea gardens. Anyway, this was before. Was it before? No, it was after I'd fished the tea gardens. I did fish the tea gardens. I hooked 3 fish. They all got me into the willows. Oh. But it was a powerful day. It was a powerful day, and it's still with me. And I managed to. It took me all my cunning to persuade the tea lady to because she didn't let boys fish. But I kind of charmed her.
Yeah,
and I just said,
Chris Yates' way with women.
Yes. She said, "Okay, look at that jay looking in at you." Oh God! Yeah, he was just looking to say it was because you said Chris Yates.
Chris Yates,
and the Jay. I'm going to get that bloke. He's lying little git. No, I'm not. It's true. I did fish the tea gardens. I did lose those carp, and then I fished on the other side of the willows, and I knew I was going to. I had a different feel about the day that day. I just had this sort of big confidence, and I caught first cast. I caught this 2-pound wildie, And I was using a float.
You had a float on, did you?
Yellow tipped quill. I still see it going down. The sun had just come out. It had been showery, perfect fishing day, soft day, bit of shower. The rain stopped. The sun came out. The float winked on with a bit of sun that was on this sort of, slightly damp, the tip of the float, and it just sort of went down, and it was sliding to the left into the willows. I struck and just leaned to the right and waded into the water and managed to sort of just turn it and bring it out. Once it was in open water, it was fine. And, oh, God, and I didn't have a landing net. I couldn't afford a landing net, but luckily it was very shallow. It was ankle deep where I was standing, and I brought it into the ankle depth, and then it was just an inch deep, and then I could lean down and just drop the wood on the water and got both hands to it, and it's my carp. And I put it in there. I did have a keep net, but I couldn't afford that and a landing net. So
just keep the keep net.
Yeah, and I would never put a carp in a keep net now, but it was allowed in those days. And then I cast again, and I caught another one
straight away.
Yeah, a pound.
What were you freelining?
No, I was using bread.
You said,
a flake. I was using white flake, no ground bait, just in this little bay just cast in this tiny little bay, no more than 6 foot across. I was trying to get the float right in this little bay, so it was where the willows were overhanging it. And it just looked. I just knew that was where they'd be, and obviously it was a good choice because I caught 3. I caught 1. To each one getting smaller, so it was about 2 pounds a pound, and then one of about 12 ounces. No, it was a pound. It was probably, and yeah, that was me. That was me completely. And I said to a friend, "Could you look after my stuff?" He'd come. He was late. He was going to meet me at the pond, but he was late, and by the time he'd come, it was all over. And I said, "Can you just look after my stuff and my tackle? I'm going back to get my mum. I need a photograph." Even then, I wanted that trophy shot. But because after it was important, it's my first fish, so I went racing back on the bicycle, and I said, "I'll buy you a lolly, or what would you like, lolly or a choc ice?" Because there was a little sweet shop, so literally overlooking the pond on the other side. And anyway, I came back, and my parents followed on their bicycles another 10 minutes after. They didn't want to come out, really. They were,
of course.
They were getting. I think it was a weekend. They were really, but anyway, they realised the importance of the occasion, and they came around, and and my mum took photographs, and then they cycled off home again. It was great. So yeah, so it was official. I had caught 3 carp, and you can see it in this little black and white photograph on a little Kodak.
What year is that? Give me a year.
1962. It was the year before the big freeze, and that was the tragedy. Right. That following winter was the 62, 63 winter. It started snowing in just before New Year's Day, 1963, and it snowed solidly for 2 weeks. It never stopped snowing, and it got colder and colder and colder, and the snow kept coming in, and power went off. The roads were blocked. The pond froze it was only shallow. It was nowhere deeper than, say, 3.5 foot. And in the end, it froze right to the bed, and all the carp perished. Yeah. But the crucians that were in there did not perish. It just shows you how hardy they are.
They are hard.
Yeah. I mean, there was only a small colony of them, maybe 3 dozen fish, 4 dozen fish, but enough to make it worth fishing in the next summer. But everyone thought it was gone. But the sight of these dead carp, and there was a monster there too, an absolute monster it drifted in. They all drifted into the edge. The council had to come and literally put them in bins and buried them on the heath. And I was heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken.
Special little venue. Shame it ended that way. But you caught 3. Job done.
Yeah, before the end, it was almost like I knew. I was determined I was going to catch a carp before the end of that summer, and it was something was definitely driving me because I did then persuade the tea lady to let me back in again, and I caught one. It must have been. I mean, I didn't have any scales, but it must have been 4 pounds.
Yeah. From
the tea gardens, and no one got a fish that big from the tea gardens. It was a fluke. It got into the willows several times, but I managed to get it out, and I still hadn't had I still hadn't got a landing net, and you couldn't land it from the bank because there was a kind of like a little bit of
like a ledge or something.
No, it's corrugated iron with willows holding it up, and stop the water lapping into the garden when it rose in the winter. But luckily, there was a proper carp angler fishing where I caught the gudgeon. And I knew he was, and I chatted to him earlier, and he said, "Oh, it's good carp here. You're fishing the tea gardens, aren't you, mate?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." you get one, don't you worry. He was, and he had all the gear. He even had 2 rods. He wasn't using 2 rods, yeah. And I thought, are you going to use 2 rods? I know. But when it got dark, maybe there was a rule or something, he was using 2 rods.
Snide.
But anyway, when I started shouting, I've got a carp. Could you bring your net? Yeah, hang on, mate, hang on. And no, it was hang on, lad. That's what he said. Hang on, lad, I'll be there in a minute. And then I heard him running around. Without him, I would never have landed that carp.
Fair play. Fair play.
So everything fell into place.
Too right. From that point through to finding your way onto Redmire Pool, that's some sort of progression, some leap.
That's a bit of a jump.
Yeah. What goes in between that midpoint?
What is nice? I like the order of it, and there's a kind of symmetry, because it was 1962 when I caught my first carp. It was only 10 years later that I went to Redmire.
Yeah,
10 years. Because I discovered that Tom Mintram, who's the mate of Jack Hilton, who ran the syndicate at that time, he lived in the street next door to me.
You've lived in it. You've got a next door neighbour who sorted you out early doors fishing, and then influential people a couple of doors down.
Yeah, Tattenham Grove, and I lived in Great Tattenham. So yes, it was. Once I knew he lived there, I don't know how I managed to find him. So, but the nicest thing was, I thought, I don't want to just go round there and ask him about Redmire. I went fishing first. I've got to go there with a story that he'd like, and if I can entertain him, he might tell me a bit more about Redmire. And I had no intention, honestly, I had no intention in my mind, not even in my wildest dreams, that he would eventually say to Jack, I think we might have found a new member for the syndicate if there was going to be a vacancy. There were no vacancies anyway, but I honestly didn't think that. I didn't want that.
Where did you hear about Redmire? Was it publicised?
Since I was a kid,
okay.
Since that's those first days, I knew about Redmire from the local library, because they had a copy of Stillwater Angling.
Okay.
Dick Walker.
Yeah,
and he was my hero. But by the time I was 7 or 8, he was a hero.
So your influence, Dick Walker. I mean, Dick Walker, grandfather of carp fishing.
Redmire, and to know that someone in the street next to my, or within a quarter of a mile, not only fished Redmire, he just caught the 38-pounder. Which was it was called the old 38, which was the fish that eventually turned into the 51. And it was all very peculiar. It was like someone had written this down, and you've got to follow just follow the script. You'll get there eventually, but take your time. Don't hurry. Don't rush it. Otherwise, it won't seem convincing. And it was funny. It was like it had
written in the stars. Yeah,
it was divine somehow. It was 10 years, and in that time before before I went to Redmire and met Rod Hutchinson he was also his first day. There were 2 people dropped out, and just by this wonderful coincidence, we were both there, and we were on we got on the list.
Yeah.
Tom just asked me one day if a vacancy did come up, would you like to fish? Because you'd probably enjoy it, kind of thing. I said, would I? Yeah, I said, but I don't think I could afford it. It was £50 a season then.
£50
in 1972. I couldn't. I'd only just. I know you just come out of art school, so I was a starving art student. But anyway, and Rod wasn't starving, but he was always off work because he was fishing. But he was a scaffolder. He was a Lincolnshire.
Right, was he scaffolding at the time?
Yeah, he was the Lincolnshire scaffolder. But we used to write to one another. And I've got some great letters from him.
And from Rod,
and the fact that we both, he just suddenly, he wrote to me to start with, just to say, I've got your address from Tom. That's right.
Right.
And you're going to start fishing Redmire this year, and so am I. It was that, and that was my first letter. And I think we're going to be. It's not certain, but it seems like we're on the same rota. So tell me about kind of thing. What you've been doing. What baits you've been using. Have you because he'd been doing revolutionary stuff.
Yeah, of course.
I hadn't been doing it. I've been catching. My revolutionary stuff was catching carp on bread. On potatoes.
Potatoes, yeah.
Great. Potatoes, such a good bait.
Yeah, really good.
Free-line potatoes, so heavy that you have to throw them out like a hand grenade.
Do you have to chuck them in your hand?
Splash! And you think, this isn't going to work when you first hit, but then you realise the carp were onto them fairly quickly. God, yeah, we're good. A couple of good lakes around us where the carp used to be mad on potatoes, as much as they were on sweet corn later on. But anyway, yeah. So I knew that I was going to meet this person. He had a lovely kind of, he knew his stuff, but he was also a bit crazy. From the letter, I just thought some bits were completely illegible, but I just liked it. And then we met at Redmire in June, the end of June, 1972, the last weekend in June 1972, and he'd got there first. He was literally lying on the dam in his greatcoat. He doesn't remember when we talked about it later on, years later, like 20, 30 years later. He said, "No, I wasn't. I was asleep in my bivvy." "No, you weren't, Rod. You might have been." You might have looked like you were asleep, but you weren't. You had your head was propped up, and you were looking along the surface of the lake, and you were lying on the dam at Redmire, and the first thing he said to me, "Are you Chris Yates?" That was because there was another member of the Rota, which was Bob James, and he'd never met either of us. He just said, "Are you Chris Yates?" I said, "You got him in one," and and you must be Rod. I knew it wasn't Bob. I hadn't met Bob Jones. It was Bob Jones. He was a teacher, lived down in South Wales, so it wasn't very far for him. And because he was a teacher, he didn't get the full week during term time. He could just fish at weekends. So we had the place to ourselves for that first week. And he'd come at the weekend, and he'd been the syndicate since the beginning. So we didn't want him to. We didn't want anyone, and we didn't want someone of authority to be there. We were happy. We both agreed it was good that he wasn't here to show us the ropes. We didn't want someone showing us the ropes. We were going to make it up as we went along.
Yeah, do your thing.
Yeah, and so that was good. So we did our thing, and it was mad. We didn't catch anything. We had chances, and we caught eels. For a while.
Yeah,
and the great thing was. I'd brought sweet corn because whenever I was overnighting, I'd bring eggs and sweet corn. That was my carp fisher's breakfast: scrambled egg with sweet corn. That was a good way to start the day, over a gas stove. So I brought my sweet corn. I was going to have sweet corn and scrambled egg every morning, and then I'd have something a bit more substantial for supper, and that was going to be it. Keeping it to a minimum, and I was looking at the sweet corn, and I put it in with the egg when it was sort of cooking. I was thinking, I reckon sweet corn might work. And I said to Rod, "What do you reckon? Should I try some of this sweet corn?" And he, it might work. And he kind of, I think he said later that he had used it before, and he was thinking of using it, but he didn't want to sort of, over egg it in case he didn't want to overdo it, because he wanted to be the first one to try it. And so maybe he really had tried it before. But anyway, he said, it could work. And I just thought, it's going to work. And I'm so glad also that it didn't work the previous season, because I'd thought about this before, and I got permission to fish this lovely carp lake, and we were catching them on floating crust, wildy water again, big, quite big wildies, some of them. And I thought, when they got a bit shy, once we caught one or two of them and they stopped feeding, I threw some sweet corn in. I'm going to try sweet corn, and if I get one, I'm going to stick with the sweet corn. Nothing happened,
didn't it?
And I'm so glad, because if it had happened, I would have told Tom Intram, and the whole syndicate would have known about it, and it would have been blown by the sun, because we were the last ones in. So that was a bit of luck in a way. Anyway, so I did use it that evening, and I cast out, and nothing happened. Silver paper on the line. Yeah, I just love the sound of line running off an open spool through the silver foil. It would wake me like that. It's like a snake in my ear. I could hear it from maybe 40 yards. When I wandered off, say to have a pee or something, and I hear this, it rustles as well as hisses. And I had this wonderful hiss right in my ear, because it was right next to my head. I used to just sleep on the ground. I never had a bed chair. I like sleeping on the ground. And I just saw this line, a blur going through the silver foil. And I thought, a run at Redmire. Oh God! And I grabbed hold of it. I didn't bother to take the pickup over. I just whacked it, and the rod went straight over. Oh God! Ping! Oh! And I was in such a kind of panic. I should have I was holding the line, for God's sake. The whole thing went over and just snapped, and this big bow wave went off. And I just thought,
no,
idiot. You absolute idiot.
That was on the sweet corn, yeah?
Sweet corn. But I was using 2 rods. One had snail, freshwater snail. The other had sweet corn. And I was trying to think, it was the corn. That was the corn rod, wasn't it? So I had to reel the other one in. Yeah, snail. Hadn't been touched. And I went round to later. It was maybe 3:30 in the morning. So I couldn't go round to see Rod straight away. And I just busting to tell him that, I just had a run. It was a carp. I saw the wave go off. It was a monster. And I went round and I told him what had happened. Must have been 4 hours later when he woke up. and anyway, he said, well, I'm going to get one today. It is a good day. It's grey. It's just right. And he started stalking with worms.
Yes.
I watched him on the far side. He was up a willow. He was following this fish, casting worm, free line. And eventually he hooked a fish. And the shout, I still remember, Chris! And he's right opposite me. I looked over to him. He was up in the shallows, a bit to the right of me. I was in Greenbanks. And so I grabbed my net and I ran all the way round. And he'd got it under control. And it was a 6-pounder, but it was a Redmire carp.
Redmire carp, yeah, exactly.
And I've got a picture of him. I haven't got the negative anymore. I've got a picture of it with a net. I'm holding the net and I'm taking the photograph through the net with the carp, and there's Rod in the tree up above. The Rod is up above the...
he's above you?
He's in the tree. Yeah, he's still in the tree. So he hadn't come down the tree. That's why I had to come... Yeah, and I weighed you down and landed it for him. So it was a great moment. And that evening, I got an 11-pound common on sweet corn, and then the rest of the sweet corn history has started then.
So literally, that was the first time that you tried it.
Yeah,
properly was on Redmire.
Yeah, I had a run. Yeah,
and lost that one.
And then at the end of the week, and I'm glad I didn't get a monster. It would have been too much, but I did get a 16-pounder. Fantastic looking 16-pounder. It was an immaculate looking fish.
Yeah,
from the willow pitch as well.
What was the general sort of fishing reaction, camaraderie like with Rod? Because he's always sort of remembered as a real character, a bit like yourself, completely unique. In some aspects, definitely a bit out there, but very much his own man. Obviously, a brilliant carp in mind. Was it as everybody has sort of reminisced with regards to your experiences with Rob?
Yeah, yes, he was a great character. He was completely authentic in everything he did. He would never try to sort of, kind of gild the lily or anything. He told it you straight. But also, he's a very emotional character.
Right.
When he caught that 6-pounder, when he got down to the tree, he was trembling. He was trembling like an adolescent, like like I was when I was 11. And we were, I was only 24. He was a few years older. He was in his late 20s, but he was visibly moved, emotionally moved by that moment, and it was wonderful. And I remember the look he gave me. So, what do you reckon? Yeah, for a northerner. Not bad, because it's Lincolnshire he comes from.
Yeah.
And you being such a soft southerner kind of thing. It was always going on about me being a dopey southerner. So and I just laughed. I just thought that's great to see so much joy.
Yeah.
And he's a big lad, and he was and he liked his beer and all that. And then here he was. He was in bits because of this 6-pounder and the first Redmire carp of our week. And it was a fantastic moment. And I just thought, I'm going to really enjoy this summer. And it's still my best ever summer fishing.
That was your best ever summer?
I had 2 years. Those first 2 years, it was that first summer was completely magical. The next summer was probably even more magical, but it didn't hit me quite the same way because I was a little bit more kind of accustomed to the magic. So it's never quite as sharp or bright when you get more accustomed to it.
Why was it so magical? Because of the fact that you were able to do your own thing, because of the water, because of the whole, I don't know, the old feel or the atmosphere there? Was it all that in one?
Because I'd grown up, like Rod. He didn't discover Redmire in a library book. He discovered it through reading. He'd been quite a mad fisherman, and so we would read all the papers. I didn't know about the Angling Times when I was 11, any of the mags, and I didn't know any anglers at all. His granddad was a fisherman, I think. He's one of the family. I think it was his grandfather was a fisherman. He was fishing in the family, and he knew mates of his fished. None of my friends fished. So with me, I was on my own, and I really liked that. And I've been like that all my life.
Have you?
I like to do things on my own.
Yeah.
Like the harrier. It's like I discovered that bird. No one else has ever seen a hen harrier. You know, it's like, because my friends have seen, you know, one of my mates, Kevin Pye, he's a lovely bloke. He's seen hen harriers since he was young, because he used to go up to Scotland where they're much more common than down here. But there's not many people who've seen hen harriers. Right. And so it was almost like, it was like carp were my discovery. Hen harrier was my discovery.
You said that to me off camera as well downstairs. You said when, even now, like when you've been out, it might be that you've seen a hen harrier, it might be that you've gone fishing, but you like just to go home and sort of let it resonate in your own head rather than, I don't know, maybe let's think about it in a more modern context. You catch something and it's a photo and it's straight on social media, or you're telling everybody. For you, that's not it, is it? It's your own personal.
That's not important.
Yeah,
no, I have it in my heart, you know, and that's important. And then from my heart, it goes into my dreams. I dream about hen harriers like I used to dream about carp, and like I used to. I was dreaming about carp this morning. And that's absolutely true. That dream I had. And I was when I woke up this morning, and it was quite early. It was ridiculous. It was like just getting light, and I thought, I want to find that lake. You know, I've never fished that lake. I was dreaming, but sometimes I'm at Redmire. Very often I'm in a punt at Redmire.
Oh yeah,
I'm lying in the punt, and I'm saying to myself, oh, no, I'm not saying to myself. I'm saying to the carp, I can feel you, and that's come to me quite often. I can still feel you. Because they're moving, and I'm following their movements by lying flat on the punt, on the boards, and I can feel the vibrations of the carp moving beneath me. It's quite an eerie sensation.
Yeah.
But I have that dream. That was a recurring dream in the years after I first left Redmire, and then I went back again. I was given another invitation to go back, which was, you know, surprised me. And and I didn't leave under a cloud like Rod. Rod left under a cloud, which was very unfair, because he was accused of something which he never did.
Yeah,
it was absolutely unfair, and I was really, really angry when I tried to sort of
stand up for
engage with the, and that's why I went up, because I was so cross, and I thought, well, if they ever do ask me, I'll just say no. You know, you don't treat your members well. But it got, the syndicate got more and more broken up. Jack left, and Tom Mintram took over the running of it, and I still don't quite understand why they accused Rod of annoying one of the people on the estate. We used to just call him old Bufton. Old Mr. Bufton lived in the cottage by the gate where you come through into Redmire. Lovely. I mean, we used to talk to him. We used to take him up the pub. Right. He would never have insulted him or offended him. That's what he was accused of. He offended this old Mr. Button. I said, Rod would never offend anybody at Redmire. He just doesn't. He's not that person.
Yeah, exactly.
It's somebody else. And that's all. They described this person he'd obviously been offended by someone who'd probably wanted to come and look at the lake, and he was obviously always told, if a stranger comes and he's not a member of the syndicate, don't let them through the gate.
Yeah.
So that's what has happened. And for some reason,
Rod was a scapegoat.
Yeah, well, Rod was a scapegoat because he was doing too well.
Right, catching too many.
He was catching. It was wonderful. You know, he used to catch too many when I was with him, but sometimes, he might catch 5 20s, but I'd always catch maybe one. But my one was bigger than all his 20s. That happened very often.
Why do you think that is?
And he got quite pissed off.
I bet he did. Why do you think that is? Do you think there's anything in it? Do you think there's anything tactically in it, or do you think
he was a much better fisherman than me? He was much more thorough.
Yeah,
he was detailed. The detail of, even though his gear looked rubbish, especially in the early days, it was very everything was down to a T. It was very particular, very pernickety, in fact, very precise. Where I was, I just liked fishing with my sweet. I did fish with a Mitchell 300 and an Amberdex. They were my 2 fixed spool rules. But I really liked fishing with a centre pin because you're not fishing through gears. When you're playing a fish with a centre pin, it's direct. That's the sensation you get through a centre pin is so much better than a fixed spool reel. You're only half there with a fixed spool reel. But with a centre pin, you're with it all the way. So, so I caught some big fish with a centre pin. Didn't catch my biggest, which was a shame. I'd like to have caught the 51-pounder with a.
Talk to me about that. The iconic, the Bishop, the capture, the sort of lead up to that. Was it ever I don't know. Is it ever a target for you to target a big fish or look for a British record? I wouldn't think it.
No, it was. I think I've said it before. I think I was the only person in the syndicate who didn't imagine that they were going to catch, or didn't think they were going to get a chance for a big carp. Even though I'd caught a carp that was only 4 ounces or less than 4 ounces from the record. I caught a 43 pounder on my third week. It was 43 and 13 ounces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, free line sweet corn for that one? Was that seen and stalked, or was that just...
It was seen in a way, because there's a huge patch of bubbles between the island and the fence pitch. And I dropped... it wasn't free lined, it was sort of 3 swan shot, straight into the patch of bubbles, put the rod down, sat back, and within minutes, the line slowly tightened. Yeah. But it was a gutty fish. I wasn't very proud of it. I didn't want to take it out of the water. It was spawn bound.
Yeah.
It was not a good fish to catch. To take out. And we did take it out of the water, and it was unfair on the fish. I felt sorry for it. But anyway, it was a 40 pounder. I could say that's. And then and Rod, we both thought we would get proper like a 30. We were expecting a 30 in that first year, but we didn't. But then Rod did get a 30 pounder the next year, and I wasn't able to be there with him when he caught it. He was so excited. He phoned me when he got in from Redmire. I had to do wedding duty.
Oh, wedding duty.
Yeah, I had to be best man on somebody. Ugh. On a Redmire week, you can't do stuff like that.
Yeah, inconvenient.
But when it came to Rod is connected to the 50 pound story, because although he'd long gone from Redmire, I wrote to him in April of that year, 1980. I said, Rod, this doesn't often happen, but I've had this very strong feeling these last few weeks that I'm going to break the carp record. So this is just a note to you to say that I am going to break the carp record. And I drew
sent him that letter?
And I drew a picture of and he even said, he wrote back and said, interesting, you always catch the big commons. I get the big mirrors. You've drawn me a mirror carp. I said, yeah, I think it's going to be a mirror carp. So, and no word of a lie. That was probably April 80. Yeah, 1980. Yeah, I did a sort of little card, this is just a greetings card to say,
what in the world sort of premonition? Did you see it in a dream?
It's a dream. Yeah, it's in my dream diary. And obviously you can say, well, you're dreaming like you had a dream this morning. I had a dream this morning that I'd caught this. I was fishing. I didn't catch a carp, but I was fishing this wonderful carp lake. So you could say, yeah, you can make up anything in a dream. You cannot make up a dream. A dream comes out of somewhere else in your brain, and this has come back from that place. It's that sort of hunter's, that very primal core part of your brain, which sort of remembers stuff from generations ago. That instinctive side, and anyway, now a story that not many people. I've never told this story before. It was very lucky that I caught that fish. I couldn't have been more fortunate when I tell you that when I got home from, I'd gone to France with my wife. Then she was my wife for a year. I think we got married the previous year.
Yeah,
and we so loved the place, the cottage where we went for a honeymoon. We went again just before the season started, but it was the time of the season where they always do a working party at Redmire, so I missed the working party.
Right.
And I'd missed the working party before, because I used to say to Tom Mintram, you don't need a working party. Leave it as it is. Let it overgrow. The more it's overgrown, the less likely they're going to see you when we get there. We need that cover. He wouldn't have that. Anyway, so I didn't want to go on the working party anyway. This was one of the reasons I went to France with my wife, my then wife, Claire. And when I came home, there was a letter on my doorstep which said, I'm sorry, we have decided, because this is the second year this has happened, we want to, you're expelled from the syndicate. No. So I was officially thrown out of the syndicate.
Because you didn't go on either of the year's work parties?
Yeah. And, I suppose if that's the rules, fair enough. And I was quite resigned to it. I thought, well,
were you?
Yeah, I thought, well, and then I remembered the dream, because I'd written to Rod, 2 months earlier, and I thought, no. So I went straight round to Tom's, and I said, Tom, I didn't mention it at the time, but before I went to France, I did go up to Redmire, and Dave Bufton, who's the son of the old man Bufton, who had been offended by someone or other.
Oh, yes, yeah.
He saw me. We had a long chat together, and he said, "So what are you doing? There's no fishing." I said, "No, I'm doing a little bit of, I'm going to clear up some of this, all these old bits of bonfire where people have had from last year. There's bits of stump lying around. So I've never liked them, so I'm going to clear them away and just make it a little bit so the people know that I have been here, and that I had my own little work party, but a very kind of private work party. And I was there all day, had a lovely day, spent most of the time up in the trees watching these carp being completely oblivious of me. And it's fabulous. Anyway, so I went to Tom, and it was an absolutely honest, a truthful story. And I said, if you don't believe me, phone up Dave, and he'll confirm that I was there and that he saw the smoke rising. I made a little fire, and I burnt what was left of all the cuttings and everything. There's bits of thorn that we're always catching in our landing nets, remember? I've moved all that. And he said, "Oh, well, why didn't you tell me, Chris?" It's that kind of, and then he phoned up John Carver.
Yeah.
And I really like John. And John would, he wanted to conform with what Tom wanted. He didn't want to sort of rock the boat.
Of course.
So he'd said, and it was obviously, they didn't want to agree with Tom, but Tom was quite officious.
Yeah.
It was, that's how he was. He liked things to be, he would have made a good major in the army.
Yeah.
And so they had a little chat on the phone. I could hear them. And then Tom said, "Well, I'll hand him over to you." So I spoke to John, and I explained what has happened. And he said, and John was very nice. He said, "Well, if that's fair enough. So it's up to." Well, he actually said it's up to Tom then. It's fine by me. So he implied it was fine by John.
Okay,
which was good. And I thought that's
a positive.
Thank you, John. And then. So what do you think? And they said, "Oh yeah, well, I can't remember who it was that you could have my place, but I'm going to have to tell him that he's going to have to wait another year or two." I can't remember who it was. It might have been. No, I can see his face, but I can't remember. I can't remember his name. But anyway,
you're back in.
So I'm back in. I talked myself back in.
Good work.
I mean, talk about it's like I had to do a sales pitch.
Yeah. Yeah, to be fair, you've been down and you have done a work party, just not at the work party time.
But I didn't tell anybody, and I thought, no, why should I? I've done it. And, and there was no chance, because it was the next day I was going to France. I just had that thing, I better do that, so at least I know. So maybe I thought in my head, it wasn't deliberate. I didn't think I was going to sort of be, I was going to be given my marching orders for not going. But the best thing was that when I went the next time, and there was John Carver, and there was Barry Mills.
Barry Mills.
Yeah, of course it was. Yeah, because I haven't seen him for like 40 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Barry Mills, lovely bloke. Knew his birds too. He really knew his birds.
Feathered birds.
Yeah, feathered birds. Yes. Yeah. So it was the three of us, and I didn't say anything about my pre-vision.
Yeah,
that had. But the 16th was the next. We met on the 15th. We were having tea and everything, and I was calm, and I knew it was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen the next day.
That confident?
Yeah, I was totally confident, and I just
the situation, the swim, the method, everything.
I was fishing in Greenbanks, which was my favourite swim. Always been. So I caught my first Redmire carp, and I thought it's going to happen here. And if it doesn't happen here, I'll know from here. I'll be able to
gauge where to go.
Yeah, it'll tell me where to go. Sure enough, it happened, because it was a big thunderstorm in the afternoon, late afternoon, evening, a violent thunderstorm. And I was under an ash tree, which is never a good place to be under. I learned later. Apparently they're called widowmakers. Yeah. Woodmen call ash trees widowmakers because they have a habit of a big brittle living branch will just break off. And I was camping, my bivvy was right underneath, and there was lightning overhead and lightning hitting the ground. So that was a good sign. Isaac was on my side that day.
Yeah.
That day. And then the wind picked up, a really powerful wind blowing right up to the shallows past me, and that's always a good sign. At Redmire, if you get a wind blowing to the shallows, you put away all but your best rod, and put on your best shirt, and get ready for something special. And you've got to do it properly. And so many fish went up. You could see him going up. It was a procession going up, and Barry and John were at either end of the deep water down near the dam.
Yeah.
I I think Barry was in Pitchfords. That's right. He was sort of maybe halfway up the pool, but I was right up near the top. So I was seeing these fish go by, and then I thought, I'm going to follow them. So I followed them up, and they were all swirling about, kicking up the red mud, and you could see these great sort of furls of mud, like they'd opened like roses, these rose-shaped clouds of Redmire mud, and they were head down in it. And I had sweet corn, and I cast, say, three grains, free line, straight out on a common that was probably 25, 26. I said, go on. And it was, literally just nosing through. It came up to the corn, and it went right up to it, and the pectorals opened. I said, go on. So glad it didn't, because it just went poof, and it blew it. It blew the corn, and the corn went up, and it came down again, and it looked really hard at it, and no, I don't fancy that. And it went off. And that was so close to not being what I was imagining it was going to be. It went off. Then maybe 20 minutes later, I moved maybe 2 or 3 feet, so closer to the willow that was on my left. And I was looking to see which cast. I was casting. It's like trout fishing. I was casting. I cast 2 or 3 times to other big, one to a 30. Yeah. 30 pounder came right over the bait, slowed, hesitated, looked at the bait, went on. I thought, I'm going to get one in a minute. They're on. They're definitely on. And then I saw this shape coming around the willow from the deep water. It was coming up. It was coming up to join the others. And it was like the reflection of a cloud just going by. And I just reeled in from the 30. So I just went, and I cast very close, too close to the willow. And I thought, you bloody idiot. But as I cast, and this is what I mentioned in the book, there was a little blast of wind, a little breeze just blew up. There was plenty of wind blowing the ripples, but I was on the lee side of the willow. And that bow in the line that the wind caused made me miss all the willows. So the bait landed exactly in front of this carp as it went by. And the line was going down. I could see it hadn't sunk yet, and then it tightened. It picked it
on the drop.
On the drop. It took it. I've never had a carp on the drop like that, and it just carried on going. It was like chub fishing. Yeah. It's when you're casting a big black slug, they'll often take it on the drop. And I watched the line tighten. I clicked up for the pickup, so and there was this, and it did a kind of pivot, and the pivot was incredible because you could see the bottom. This swirl, and so you could just see the lake bed for a split second. I could see the lake bed because the swirl was so violent. Wow! It just swept the water in a circle away, and there was this big hollow as it turned, and then it just took off, and it was going round the willow. So I dived in, just jumped straight in, and waded out to keep a line on it, and then it ended up maybe 20 minutes later after it got me stuck in the other side of the willow, and I was shouting for the net because I was too far out by then, and
jumped in without,
and I was going to land. I was going to try and land it right up to my right, where there's an old swan's nest, where there was a bit more open water. I could keep more control on it, and no one stirred. I got a loud whistle. No one stirred. So I was bellowing, and suddenly, what is it? I want a net. I think I've caught a really, really big fish. As I was making then, and then I heard on the far bank, and it was John in his waders, and he was coming along, and he tore himself through some brambles, and I could hear him crunching, and he went over the feeder stream, and he came all the way round to me, and he looked at us and said, where is it? I said, it's still stuck. It's stuck the other side of the willow, but I'm not pulling it, because if I pull it, I'm pulling it into the willow. It came in from the far side. It needs to go out the far side. Yeah, so I've slacked almost. You could see the line, not really tight, but it was well hooked. I just knew it was secure. You got that feel. Yeah. You know it's quite well hooked until you don't want it to start knocking around in amongst the sunken branches. Yeah, yeah. So I was really easy with it, and then suddenly it just went, and there was a bit of a ripple from the willow, and it was Barry. He climbed out into the tree and shaken it. He didn't say anything. Suddenly this head appeared, and he was looking at it, and he said, it's the old 38. And the old 38 is the fish that Barry and I had both seen the previous autumn, and he'd seen it earlier that week. In that week we'd fished together, and he said that he thought it was a big 40, and he was in the willow. No, it wasn't the willow. It was a alder in the willow pitch where the willow used to be. He was up there and he said, "Come and have a look. Come and have a look. It's that same fish." He said, "What do you reckon?" And we were looking down from the treetop, And I said, yeah, it's definitely a big 50. Big 40, sorry. It's definitely a big 40. That's a record. That's definitely a record. And Barry said, I think that's 50. And that was the autumn before. And then so when he said it's the old 38, what he was saying to me was, that's the 50.
That's a 50, yeah.
Yeah. And so, of course, I nearly went to pieces then. I thought, because it was all over the place. John was wading out with a net.
And you know what you've got on.
I know what I've got on.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
I didn't want to know that. But I'd seen it. I saw it before it took the bait. I knew it was a colossus. And I just kept it coming. I was tightening. The rod was right round then. And the great thing was, this was Dick Walker's Mark IV. It was his rod.
His very rod.
And I broke his record on his rod. Yeah, it wasn't the rod he caught the fish on.
This is like some witchcraft or perfect symmetry stuff going on, isn't it?
It's so weird. And the fact that I told Rod I was going to catch it on the first day. And eventually he got the net. He managed to squeeze the net underneath it. It was in maybe 6 inches of water. He managed to squeeze the net right underneath it and lift it. And as he lifted, there was this violent sort of crash, and the rod shook. And I thought, that's it, it's gone. Because it had gone slack. It had gone slack because he was lifting it up, as much as he could.
God.
And I thought the hook had gone.
Yeah.
And the fish had gone. But it was so much muck and mud everywhere. It was because when the fish flipped, it was mud went all over John. His face, his clothes.
It's just that shallow and it's that big.
What a hero he was. And he just turned around and said, I've got it. I said, just bring it in. He said, you must be joking. He was virtually up to his chest in mud. And he was wearing,
John.
Wearing thigh waders. Yeah. And so I thought, I'm going to have to do it. I snapped the line and I put the rod, tossed it over the barbed wire fence by the bank, and then I waded out and I got hold of John, I got hold of the net, and we both heaved it through the silt, and then we heaved it onto the dry bank over the fence. And by that time, Barry had arrived with a big pan of water because the fish was covered in mud.
Yeah.
And we washed it down, washed the silt off it, and we both looked at it. We all three rather looked at it, and he brought a sack and we put it in the sack, and I said, what do you reckon? and Barry's got a good, he's got a good sense of stuff, and he kind of just, weighed it in his hand. He said, that's probably 53 pounds. He said 53 straight away. There was no hesitation.
That's mental as well.
So it was definitely over 50, and it was a lovely looking fish. It was when I caught it, because I had caught this fish before.
Yeah,
years before when it was 38, when it came out, I think 3 times in a season, which I thought was mad. No fish comes out in 3. No, people accept that happens quite a bit, and it looked like an old fish. I thought its days were numbered.
Right.
I was quite sorry. I didn't even take a photograph of it. Rod took a photograph of me with it. I caught it float fishing off the dam, and I put it back and I said, well, have a good summer. Hope you don't bother any other fishermen. We won't bother you, and enjoy your last summer. And I really did think, and I said that to Rod.
Was it? Why did it just look tatty, or?
And what had happened in the meantime? The lake had virtually dried up.
Okay.
It was the drought of 76. There was just a pool of water in the middle. And when it refilled itself, the lake, it's like, you left it fallow. The fish were all right. They didn't have much oxygen, but they did survive. But when it refilled, the lake itself became so enriched by all the stuff that had grown up wild around that the fish packed on pounds. Within months.
I was going to say, because that's not carp angler's bait, is it?
No, absolutely.
You're fishing a bit of sweet corn or whatever.
Absolutely, and it was, and when it did refill, it was the whole of the winter, and no one fished through the winter.
Yeah.
Nobody put bait in the winter because no one fished it. Not in the 70s and 80s. They started to a bit by the mid 80s, certainly.
What was the biggest carp you'd caught? That 38 before this fish, was that the biggest you'd caught personally?
No, I had that 40, didn't you? The gutty 43.
40.
And I'd also hooked a fish that was bigger, but let's not talk about that too much. Just because I used to name the 4 or 5 biggest fish. I'm named them after chess pieces.
Yes,
which is why I call the bishop the bishop. It was that chess piece. But there was also the king, which I'd seen once. Rod had seen it just once. Jack had seen it 2 or 3 times and said it was 4 foot long. And when
is this the big common?
Yeah, when Rod saw it, he said it's bigger than that. I think it's nearly 5 foot long, and he was absolutely that was 72. He'd seen it in October 72 and phoned me up from the call box. He ran He drove down to Langarren, phoned me from the call box. What, you said you'd be up here. You've just missed the greatest sight in angling history. I've just seen this, the big common. The big common was what I called the king. And he said, Jack reckons it's 4 foot long. It's bigger than that. It's as big as a man, he said. And I love that.
What a comment.
I just fell around laughing, on the phone. And I just thought, that's great. Can I quote you on that, Rod? I said, and and so when I arrived there Friday evening, because I'd been working on a book cover. That's when I was just getting into doing book covers and record covers then. And I had to finish this book. It's well paid, this cover. And I managed to get it handed in time on the deadline, got to Redmire in the evening. First cast, 14-pounder. And you bastard! On sweet corn from the Willow Pitch. And he'd had a 22. He'd been there all week. He had a 22 mirror. And then I had a 24 in the morning. And then in the evening, I hooked a fish off the dam. And again, I was fishing off the island to start with. And I said to Rod, brother, I'm just going in the far corner of the island. And we had this book is well known to anyone who's read my first carp book. I'm going to fish till almost dark. And then we've got this we'd met this couple in the pub, and they were going to cook us supper that night. We were meant to be at the pub at 7, or it might have been 6, because it was late October, last week in October. So it would have been getting dark by then. Yeah. So I said, but I've got a chance for fish. And he said, well, let's go. Let's go. No, we've got half an hour before we need to leave. So I went down, cast out, nothing happened. Sweet corn, porcupine quill, 10 minutes slid away, and I'm using no weed now. The weed is gone. I'm using 6-pound line, and my normal rod, and I've got a Mitchell 300, and the Mitchell 300 starts to go, and it just goes. Shut up, Chris. And it just kept on going. And I was shouting to Rod, and he said, "What you got?" And there was anxiety in his voice. And by the time he got round to me, there was about 4 or 5 turns left on the spool, and I had just over 100 yards. And then it stopped, and it started to come back slowly. And I said, I don't think it's that. I don't know. I said, it doesn't feel. It's not lively, but it's unstoppable. So I can't tell how big it is. And I brought it all the way back to the dam wall. He said, okay, I've got the net, lift it up. And we were I wasn't in the corner of the dam where I'd hooked it up, in the middle of the dam. So it was about 10 foot of water in those days. And I started to just lift it, and it would go down. I lift it, get it up a yard, go down. I said, it's not coming.
That deep fart, just hold it.
It wouldn't come up. And then after about maybe 4 or 5 minutes, it started to go, and it went off. And it happened untold times. And the stars came out, the moon appeared, and it was cold. It was going to be a frost that night, and my hands were getting numb. And Rod said, I think you've got the big one. You must have got what else could do this? If there was any weed around, we'd have lost it. It's just going around the snags. Why isn't it going in the snags? There's snags off the evening swim. There's bits of an old boat house there, still there. And it missed it every time. And the corner of the dam, there were snags, and it was going round the corner, and it wasn't going in the snags. It was coming towards us each time, and each time it got underneath us, I couldn't lift it up. I was using 6-pound line, and idiot. But maybe it wouldn't have taken the bait.
Yeah, you might not have got the bite. Yeah.
And eventually we went over to the shallow corner, and we got it up onto the surface. It was coming on, and Rod, and it turned. And when it turned and went away, I said, Rod, it's still the line is in the landing net. It's caught around the little S ring.
No.
Where the arms reach out. Where the drawstring goes across.
Yeah.
And it's caught, and he shook the, and when he shook the landing net, the line went slack. I thought, oh, fuck it, that's it, it's gone. And then it all came back to me, and I wound up, and it hadn't gone. And we got it in again. It came across the surface, and then we got it in the net. And I said, all right, just pause for a minute, Rod. Just pause. I put the rod down. I said, I'm ready for you now. And he lifted it. He said, it's not as big as you think. I said, I don't care.
That's one hell of a scrap.
It wasn't even a 30. It was 24 and a half.
Wow.
And it was over 3 foot long. It was like a 24-pound wild.
Yeah, wildy, exactly.
And it was so solid. And you couldn't hold it. It was a bit like trying to hold an eel.
Was it all bristly and like angry as well?
Yeah, really. And you had a lovely slick kind of kind of flank. It looked in the prime of life, but you couldn't hold it. It was fighting still. So we put it in a big sack and we tried to photograph it in the morning and we let it go. and it just went whoosh, went up like a torpedo, and we never saw it again.
Wow.
No one ever believed us, I don't think. And luckily they kept the supper warm for us. So
did they?
And we were 2 hours late. It took 2 hours. 2 hours to land that bloody fish.
That is a psycho of a fish. But you had a story to tell them as well when you got your tea, didn't you?
Yeah.
A 2-hour fight.
Yeah.
Back to the Bishop. So you've landed that fish. It's in a net. You've put it in a sack. Does British Record come into your head at that point? What comes into your head? You've had this premonition, so you're very confident in it happening.
Yes. I thought, well, it's got to be official then. I'll have to tell Tom. And the first thing Tom said, don't tell anybody. And I thought, oh God, he didn't want anybody to tell anybody about it. Otherwise, everyone will want to sort of, there'll be people coming in offering more money for the syndicate and all the rest of it. So he was concerned about that, and he came, and the whole syndicate came down the next morning.
Did they?
Everybody came down. Yeah.
That's how it should be, no?
Dave Short, there was Tom came down. Of course, there was Barry and there was John, and there was one or two people obviously couldn't come, but anyway, there was a good turnout. And I went and bought fish and chips I went to Ross and bought fish and chips for everybody. Came back, and the fish was still in this big, and it was fine. We kept checking it. It's in deep water. You could see it was stirring. So we took the photographs. And no, we took the photographs first. We didn't wait that long. That would be cruel. We photographed it, then we let it go. Then I got the fish and chips. And at that time, Tom was still saying, these photographs are not to go anywhere.
Well, you should have to keep them.
No one must know. And by the time I came back, John and Barry had both very diplomatically persuaded him that you cannot keep this quiet.
Yeah.
This is
monumental.
Yeah, yes, and the fact that he caught it on Dick Walker's rod and things like that, says we can't put the lid on that. So reluctantly, Tom agreed, and then saw sense, because the word would have got out. It had already got out,
of course,
because I'd phoned home, and
that starts to spiral, doesn't it?
And then it's on the grapevine. Then, yeah.
What was it? I mean, you've got an iconic shot. The shot that I think of you is you with your little hat on and your and like you're there. That's a mega shot of it.
And it's nice that the punt's in the shot too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that is a mega shot of it. For you, that moment, making it official, that vision coming to reality. What can you conceptualize that moment? What was it? What was it like? Was it?
No, I was a bit of a dream.
Yeah, no,
I didn't think that. Yeah, I didn't see any great significance, other than it was great to catch this one of the aristocracy. I just wanted to get one of those big fish. Although I had caught it before, so it wasn't as if it was anything
that
I hadn't done before. Yeah.
So you had that the year previous at 38. Is that
right? No, it
7
years. 7 years.
7 years. Sorry,
there was a gap between the two when I dropped out.
Yeah,
and came back.
Yeah, and you came back.
So it was 7 years.
But that's still incredible growth in that period of time.
And it was only because of the drought year of 76, when the lake was fallow and everything grew up. There was grass, there was flowers, wonderful wildflowers all the way around, almost to the dam. And it was just that little strip, sort of 60, 70 yards of deep water, and that was good enough for them.
Wow. And for you, once that fish had caught, did you realise at the time the significance of that in terms of big carp fishing? Did you think it would ever be, well, iconic for my generation of anglers, and probably maybe the generation before? Did you think of that?
No, because it was nowhere near as sensational as Dick Walker's 44-pounder.
Yeah.
I mean, that no one believed that they could be caught. And
that's the benchmark.
You read about fish then in those days in the 50s that were, somebody had a 6-pound carp and like Burry Heath Pond, and occasionally you'd hear about a 20-pounder for one of these more kind of exclusive spots. But no, 44 pounds. I mean, that was as far as I'm concerned, that is the most iconic carp ever.
Yeah,
because it had never been done. No one ever thought it was possible.
Yeah. I get that completely.
And when I caught the 50, people knew it was possible because people had seen fish bigger than that, like the Black Queen. which I did hook on a cockle in October 78 it was. 78. I hooked it on a cockle.
Three-liner cockle. You've seen it take it.
No, I knew it was. I'd seen it before going down to where the baits were. I'd seen it feeding, and it was feeding in an unusual way, fanning with its pectorals, and then browsing through the cloud of mud. And I thought in my head, I was thinking it's trying to attract. You rake for gudgeon.
Yeah.
And I thought that's what it was doing. It was trying to attract gudgeon. And I have caught carp which have regurgitated gudgeon at Redmire. So I thought that's what it was doing. But anyway, and it came over to where my bait had been cast. I'd cast just to the right, and nothing had happened for like 2 hours. And I saw it's nearly on my bait. So I went down the tree, ran all the way around, sat for maybe 10 minutes, nothing happened. Oh, he's obviously gone now. And then the line went off, and I hooked this fish that went right across from one side to the other. Late October, again, no weed, and it went backwards and forwards along the margins, along to evening swim, Pitchfords, fence, and just a few yards off the bank, and it was like someone was driving a tractor through the silt, the bubbles.
Really?
And I thought, and there was no one on the lake, it was just me.
Just you?
And my I had a big landing net. I thought, I can do this. If it stays over there, and then by the time it comes to my end, it'll be a little bit sort of, I just don't rush it. Just keep it coming. Eventually the hook came out. But it was definitely the Black Queen. It was leather.
What are you, if the bishop is 50, 53, what is the Black Queen?
High 50s. I'd seen it twice, and Barry had seen it, and also John had seen it. John Carver.
Yeah.
He reckoned it was definitely 50.
Oh.
And that would have been the 2 years before.
Wow.
And that was I stuck with cockle the next season. I caught 3 more fish. That's all doubles, nothing over 20.
What a place. At Redmire for you, after that point, what led to the sort of end of your fishing on there? What was it that sort of, obviously you've caught an incredible fish from there, but was it a case of pastures new? Was it something fresh? Was it, what ended your time?
Yeah. It helped that I was fishing on my rota. There's a man called Roy Henry Tuckey, and I always called him Henry, mostly because I really he just looked like a Henry, but everyone else called him Roy. He was a lovely bloke. He worked for the post office, and he'd managed to get in the syndicate. And he, on his first trip to Redmire, which was 77, I landed his first Redmire carp, and it was a 22. And he caught 3 20s that first week, and he was in heaven.
Wow.
He was such a nice bloke. Unfortunately, he died, I think it might have been COVID last year. A lovely man. And it was his stories about the rivers. He used to fish for barbel. And while we were carp fishing, we would talk about other places we fished, and the stories about barbel he would tell, I would get, and I said, one day, maybe next summer, if maybe we might still be fishing here. He thought he couldn't afford to come back again at the time. It wasn't the money, it was the time. And I said, well, sometimes I do think I'd like to try something else. I'd never caught a barbel. I quite like the idea, Henry, that I'll come with you one day. You can show me where you go on the Kennet and see if I can catch a barbel. And so that's what happened. We both dropped out at the same time. That was 81. That was our last season.
Wow.
And then we dropped
onto
out.
the rivers.
I did have one moment before I dropped out when, again, I had a very strong prevision. It was, I just had to get to Redmire that week. The conditions were thundery. It was perfect. I said, the king, I'd got in my head, and my car just stopped. A Renault van, it just, the cam belt went as I was loading. I thought, but I got a motorbike, because I would often go on a motorbike when the weather was good. Got my motorbike, got about a quarter of the way there, the throttle cable snapped, and it was an obscure Yamaha. And when I walked all the way to wherever it was probably someone like Alton or Farnham or someone like that in Surrey. No, they didn't have one. We'll try and do a job enough to get you home. By then it was too late. The weather. By the time I got home, the feeling had gone, and I couldn't get the part anyway. There was no way of me getting there.
Imagine.
And I
had
a very strong feeling that if I'd got there that evening, there would have been, there was potential in the air.
As strong as the bishop?
Yeah, easily.
Oh my goodness.
I even wrote it up before I left. I said, this is, I feel the same now as I felt 16th of June, 1980. I've got to go. But there was no means of me getting there.
Wasn't meant to be.
No, exactly. And that's what I was resigned to that quite happily. I just sort of accepted it and thought, well, there's other fish to catch, other kinds of fish to catch. And now I started thinking about the barbel again.
When did you fish Redmire for the Passion episode? What year was that?
89.
89. Because that trip, if I remember, and I have watched it ridiculously in amounts of time, you did real well, didn't you? Have
320s.
320s. One up a tree.
Bob had that one.
Bobby felt the tree.
I put the bait on its nose with a blowpipe.
That's the blowpipe fish. You had the scarecrow.
Yeah, the scarecrow. I hooked a fish then, probably 15 pounds. I did have actually, without Hugh being there, I also got a couple of doubles as a scarecrow, but unfortunately it was too late in the evening. But I was determined to still, catch a fish.
Was the scarecrow like a filming gig, or was it something you'd actually?
It's something I always wanted to do when I was officially a member, but Tom wouldn't have it. He said, no, people will just laugh at you. You can't do that. You ruin the fishing for everything. It was fair enough because I would have had to have gone out and disturbed the water.
Yeah.
But I said, but Tom, I'm often on my own for the whole week. And that was the great thing because I was freelance and everyone else, they were working men. They had proper jobs.
So you'd have to run of the place.
I wouldn't be disturbing them. No. I don't want you to do that. So he kind of struck it off as an idea. So it's too stupid, but it worked. It really worked.
How did you feel about there? I mean, obviously, the place has been talked about. There've been photographs. They've been writing about the place, but putting it in film. How did you feel about A, being on camera and sort of showing it in that regard, and B, it being there with regards to your memories and the history you'd had at that place?
There was definitely I had an affinity with the place.
Yeah.
As soon as I got there, I knew the place. As soon as I stepped up, like as Rod did, we both looked at it. We'd known about it since we were kids, but as soon as we arrived there, it was like the Redmire herself was saying, "Hello, lads, it's you. Yeah, come on, come and have a cup of tea. Let's sit down." No, it was almost like that. It was so welcoming, and although it was also saying, "I'm not going to give you anything. You're going to have to earn it," but you're here now, so enjoy yourself. It was that feeling. And when we knew it was going to be hard, it wasn't as hard as we thought it might be because there were people who'd been fishing there for years and they'd had like one fish in 3 or 4 years. That's all. That was standard. It was only Jack Hilton and Bill Quinlan who were regularly catching fish. Tom had back in 68, or it might have been 69. He had the bishop. He was one of the first. I think he wasn't. It was the third person since 1959.
Right.
When it was first caught at 40 pounds. It first came out at 40 from the dam.
Wow.
Yeah. So it had been around, that fish, and that's why it was so amazing. It looked like a young fish.
Yeah, like a new penny.
Yeah.
It's not had much damage, has it? To be fair, there at all.
No, 7 years. Hadn't been caught.
Wait.
And it is incredible that the really big ones, the really special ones, they probably had been hooked.
Yeah, lost.
But lost. And it's lovely I'm just really happy to know that they were never. I wouldn't have liked it in a way. There'd been part of me thinking, that is the end of an era.
Yeah, it's a job done.
But the era never ended, and although they're not there now, they've died, and the whole place has changed a lot now.
Yeah.
And,
have you been back since?
No, I'm not going back.
No, because you've got in its heyday.
And I've got. I have a. It's been described to me now as quite an organised place in the way of the swims.
Oh, okay.
I think I don't know if it's exactly the worst that I could imagine, like wood chips and bits of and logs and like landing stages. There was a landing stage at Redmire when I fished there, but that was allowed. That was just the one.
Yeah.
But mostly it was just grass and brambles and lovely little gaps where you could get into. And if you got into it really carefully, you could get a fish in the margins if you were cunning. You can't do that if you've got a regular looking swim. It's
No.
ridiculous. And I've got a horrible feeling that that's what it's looking like now. So I'm never going back.
Don't risk it. I do remember the epic gudgeon match off the
dam.
off the dam
in the
as well,
punt.
mate. That was brilliant. I loved that romantic, just you two blokes having a bit of a chat, catching gudgeon as you would normally do. It was a really well put together series and influenced, as I said at the start, there's so many people, and still does to this day because it's still available to view. With the filming, obviously you're writing. I mean, you wrote an awful lot of books, and you continuing to write now, and you keep that sort of individuality and that style throughout the course of your writing, and we'll talk about that in due course. But with the filming aspect, did you find it easy? Did you find that pretty natural, just being in front of camera and fishing? And
I found it annoying.
Did you? Handbrake sort of style?
Because I enjoyed it, but obviously it was annoying because you're just getting into the move, getting into the. Because once I found a fish, and I just know there's just a few very simple kind of processes to go through. But you know the drill. You cast the line, and you know that you're going to have to wait. That's not good enough. You're going to have to do that again. It didn't land in the right place for that shot. We're going to have to do that again. And that was okay the first time, but that used to happen every time. Which is why when I caught my first fish off the top. On the island, I never caught a Redmire carp from the top. I was using trout pellets, and I could see this carp coming up, and it was poking at it, and it went away, and I knew, and it turned, and it came back, and I hadn't told you where I was. I hadn't told anybody where I was, and it came back, and it was only when it took it. I said, get onto the island.
How was you with that?
Yeah.
Was he annoyed?
No, he was.
Was he sound as a fish?
Yeah, because he'd taken some film earlier of fish taking trout pellets, so he'd got the kind of the prelim stuff, not from the island but from the dam. But it worked once he'd cut it together. It was great. And so when I shouted that I'd got a fish, I really had got a fish, but he wasn't there. But it meant that I could just be completely, because I can become invisible.
Yeah.
If I'm given the right amount of time.
That's how you like it, isn't it? Without.
Yeah, you've got to become. Stillness makes you invisible in the end.
Do you think in terms of modern day carp fishing, that sort of those basic principles of being quiet, not putting a silhouette on the skyline, things like that, which you probably take for granted being a man in and around. Do you think that's mostly lost nowadays?
The way most modern carp walkers.
Carp walkers.
I'm a carp walker.
A new hybrid sport.
I walk my carp every morning after a cup of tea. Yeah, most carp waters now, I wouldn't. Yeah, I'm afraid I don't. They do not appeal.
Yeah,
it's too. It's like a standard mold. It's just, and the fish look like standard molds as well. Some of them. I don't want to sound like I'm being kind of picky and critical, but.
No, not at all.
It's not for me. I just like places that look like you could have been the first person on that pond.
Yeah.
I still know several like that. So I'm always, when I go back, when I finish my book and I go back, I'm going to be happy because those places I know they're not going to change.
Yeah, exactly.
As long as people don't destroy that. That sort of virgin impression. It's just an impression because they have been fished, but they haven't been fished to change the character.
Yeah,
the fishing hasn't changed the character. Is what I mean. And there's no recognised swims. You've got to literally crawl into them. They're the places I like.
An untouched canvas as a painter would have it. Yeah. The series Passion for Angling, we have to talk about it. Apart from obviously the Redmire episode and all that, did you ever think that you'd be involved in a TV series and that it would be sort of so much of a cornerstone with regards to sort of fishing TV and the masses? It did. It was a production that did touch not just anglers but also other people that were interested in countryside pursuits and generally outdoors. Did you ever see that going to sort of where it went to? It was unbelievably popular.
No. I thought it might be popular because we went to some lovely places and we caught some good fish. So I thought it would appeal to quite a good audience. But I never had the idea, never had the kind of, it didn't cross my mind that 25 years later almost people would still be talking about it.
That's unbelievable. Was your highlights from that? Was it the river? Was it the big pike? Was it the the roach? Was it the, I don't know, what was the highlight of all that? There were so many.
I'm so bloody predictable.
Yeah,
it has to be Redmire.
Yeah, true.
That first week.
Yeah,
and that was only really a trial.
Was that like a pilot?
Yeah, that was the idea. Hugh said, "We'll just shoot that and we'll leave everything." It was just going to be a one trick. That was going to be it. But then, of course, we'd enjoyed the experience, and he persuaded us that it wasn't going to be a one trick. A one trick show. It was going to be a 6-trick show.
Yeah, exactly. Good work from Hugh.
And I thought, oh God.
Is that what you thought?
Yeah, I wasn't that impressed by the thought of having to, because my children, all my children bar one, were born in my cottage. They were all born at home, and so I was very much involved in the whole thing, rearing. And at that time, 2 of my children were born during the making of Passion for Angling.
No way.
And no, 3 of them were. 3 of them were. Yes. I think Ellen was just before, it was still being edited, still being cut. So, yes, she was around because she was in the final programme. Yes,
she was catching fish, weren't they?
Yeah, and she was being held in Claire's arms as she came down the lake bank.
She had a little party with them all, and they're all catching.
Yeah, that's right. So I needed to be with them. I didn't want to be fishing all the time. So yeah, there was tension. I had tension in myself over that. I could have, but we got it done. Everybody kind of survived, and it was, and then it went out in September of '83. It went out, the first one. I think it was the first weekend in September. Was it '83?
I can't remember.
No, it wasn't '83. What I'm talking about. We started filming in '89.
Was it early '90s?
93.
Yeah, 93. Early '90s.
It was September '90. Because I remember the Redmire one was on the 13th of September.
Was it?
Which was the day that Redmire caught Redmire. It was the day Richard Walker
had caught. Oh yeah,
caught his 44-pounder. It was the 13th of November, and that was when Redmire Dreams was shown.
Oh, weird in terms of symmetry.
Again, a nice little bit of symmetry. Yeah.
From that, obviously, in more recent times, you've been on camera again in terms of sticky baits and reflections. How with that gap in between and sort of going back to more of a modern format, how did you find that? Did you want to get involved in some filming, or was it a bit of a?
Not really. No.
Politically, no, not really.
But I used to enjoy fishing with Martin. We had a few good trips together because he's very much more he's so much more efficient than me, and I used to like the contrast of our styles, because I still catch fish in my simple way, but I used to enjoy his he could be quite dour at times, but very thoughtful and he's very good. It was a nice mix. And when he said, "Why don't we do a film? It might be quite fun." So, and it was quite fun.
You enjoy it when you're actually filming it,
yeah. And it's probably only 2-3 days, so it's not it's no big deal. Yeah. Whereas Passion for Angling was 4 years.
Yeah, that's a bit more of a commitment.
A bit more of a pain at times.
How was it working with Dan Wildball, Rich Stewart, and those guys? Did you enjoy working with those boys? Very nice. Yeah, I enjoyed it. There was a lot of fun. Yeah, I introduced them to some good games. Yeah, they need. Yeah, I bet you did. I have a kind of a mini frisbee. Yeah. It just fits in the palm. It's no more than a kind of clay pigeon. Yeah. But it flies like a frisbee. It's sort of soft rubber, and you've got it's the style of throwing. I love throwing stuff, and they loved it. So we would break off from filming, and we just you could probably throw it sort of 60-70 yards. It wouldn't go as far as a frisbee, but it's a tricky thing to catch, and we got to try and catch it and throw it, catch it all the way around this. We make a circle. There was Colin, there was Martin at the far end. Yeah, in this sort of circle, and it was good. So I introduced them. We'd always have frisbees. Always a frisbee. Even especially, it broke the ice very often when we were having a difficult day filming Passion. Yeah. By the end of it, we'd be saying, "Oh God, it didn't work." And somebody would just say, "Frisbee time." We'd all have a frisbee.
and we just out start throwing frisbees.
Rumour has it you were throwing a frisbee when a certain Mr. Miles caught a big perch out of your swim on Passion. Is that true?
Yes, I think that might be true.
He's poached your swim. The cameraman poaching your swimmer.
Yeah, it was so cold. Great in the winter with a frisbee, even if you're on your own. If you throw a frisbee into the wind and try and catch it 10 times without dropping, it's always a challenge. It has to be a challenge.
Benchmark.
Catch 10 into the wind. So you throw it hovers, it comes back to you. It's like a boomerang. If you get the throw right, get the level absolutely right, try and catch that 10 times without dropping it each time. And then by the time you're finished, you're warm.
You're warm.
Really warm. It doesn't matter how cold the wind. And that's what I'd done. I just caught it 10 times, went back to my swim, and there was Hugh in my perch swim.
Unbelievable from your cameraman.
Landing a 4-pound perch.
Outrageous. So you enjoyed Sticky. Would you do, I mean, you've done, a pretty, I would say, in all the, obviously, Passion for Angling was very influential. Sticky Reflections was an incredible film. Well, a couple of incredible films. I think probably to date, the most shocked I've ever been on a WhatsApp is when a certain Cotswolds Curly sent me on the Nash group, Chris Yates, Adidas, on a video. And I went, there's no way that Chris Yates has done Adidas. And then I clicked on the link and you'd done Adidas Palace skateboarding collab, a video all about you and a top skateboarder from Brazil on YouTube for Adidas. How does that ever come to be, Chris?
I've always liked the surreal approach to life. I like, it's like sort of a mad dream I might have had. It's just like a dream coming to life. Yeah, they just phoned up one day. Palace, the clothing company, phoned me up, and they wanted to present a more kind of natural image, sort of a nature centric image, and they were looking for a character. They need to sort of lead their top man, the superstar, the skateboard superstar, Heiter, into the woods and onto a lake to fish, which is what he wanted to do, and he wanted to see a bit of the countryside. That's all it was, and they were looking for someone to do that, and they watched one of the sticky baits. And their man, their top man, Will, he just looked and said, "Yeah, we'll, if we could get him, he looks eccentric. He looks what
we're looking for.
He looks mad enough, kind of thing." and then one of the staff at Palace said, "I know his son. I know his son William." And that's what really drew it together. She knew Will. I think been to a couple of gigs. She had been to one of his gigs, I think, but she knew Will's girlfriend. She was best friends. She is best friends with Will's girlfriend.
And Will did the music for it, didn't he?
Yeah, he did the music.
That's Yates's takeover there, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
The modern world is not safe. He's back.
Yeah,
How was the filming and all that? That is so surreal.
They were so appreciative of the place when they came to have a look round. They said, "Could we just come and have a look?" Nothing was decided. So that's how I like it, because I might not agree. Tell me what you want. They came and they just thought, what a place! My place is a complete shambles. It's a 250-year-old cottage, filled with old fishing stuff, books piled everywhere, corners everywhere filled with rubbish, pens here and pens there, and not much room to sit down. And they said, "This is lovely. This is just what we were hoping. You live a proper life, kind of thing, as you see it, as you see fit." And so I agreed to do it. It just seemed to. It was such an eccentric idea.
I love that, Chris. I can't think of any other carp angler like. I thought a carp angler might have a VW deal because everybody's got a transporter, but the fact that you've done an Adidas Palace advert is just mental, because the audience is just like, Adidas are huge, Palace with skateboarders are well cool and huge. You are obviously an absolute icon within carp fishing, but to transcend that into that marketplace, that's massive, absolutely massive.
And it just came from just because they were looking to sort of just widen their horizon a little bit. And they just had this feeling, and it came out of nothing, really. It was just this thought, let's just go for a slightly different
take,
a different audience. Perhaps would appeal to a sort of wider audience. They've already got a big audience.
Oh, God, yeah.
But they just wanted to sort of say, look, we're not just urban clothes, urban activities. We know about the country as well. We know about how the countryside might work, and about fishing and that kind of thing. So,
any more in the pipeline? Nike round the corner?
Yeah, they have. I have contracts are waiting.
Calvin Klein?
When I get home. Yeah, no, I won't be doing another one.
No, well, you never say never, Chris. I thought it was really good. If no one's seen it, go onto the old Adidas YouTube.
The good thing about it is that I live a very simple life. So it's I don't need, my car, for instance, is nearly 25 years old.
Yeah.
And it's never failed its MOT. It's a proper old Toyota, the old Toyotas, and they go on forever. So, it's never had a service in its life. That's an example of how I live.
Yeah.
My kettle is ancient, so I don't spend any money. I don't want money. I have no need for money. I don't want it. All I want is the freedom to go out every day to some place that's going to sort of just heal my heart if I'm concerned about somebody or something, or will just give me something like the hen harrier when it comes, which just lifts me off the ground and brings me joy. That's all I want. Yeah.
Chris, I massively appreciate your time. I've kept you for too long.
Yeah, I was going to be at home at 4, you realise.
You've got a tea appointment, so I'm really sorry to whoever Chris is having tea with. Before you go, I've got a few quick fire questions for you, and then I'll let you get off to tea. I honestly can say that has been an experience I will never forget, Chris, so thank you very much for that. Here's your quick fire questions. 3 words to describe yourself.
Mostly content. Mostly content. That's only 2 words.
That's good. Mostly content is 2.
Mostly content. Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
I can't have 3.
2 is even better. That's good economy. Sorry, would you rather fish with modern day fishing tackle or never fish again?
I wouldn't know how to fish with modern day fishing tackle, so that answers your question.
Very nice. If you were an animal, what animal would you come back as?
An owl.
Oh, nice. Nice. One moment in your angling career or life that you'd like to relive?
Not Redmire. Not anything special. I think if I could relive something, which I do relive every time I think of it, is that gudgeon, that first gudgeon.
Nice answer. The written word or video, which do you prefer?
Everybody knows what I'm going to say.
The written word.
Yeah.
Music, drum and bass or country and western?
I never listened to either. And yet, without music, I could not live. I have a massive collection, nearly all of it 21st century, but a lot of it is small scale orchestral, or more like maybe piano, probably composers you might not have heard of, but like there's places I've fished where I think of them and I have the music, I have the soundtrack of that place playing in my head. For instance, when I first fished a proper carp lake on my own, a big carp lake, I just listened for the first time to Shostakovich. He was a Russian composer who was nearly thrown into the salt mines by Stalin. He was from he died in the kind of late 70s, early 80s, I think. But Shostakovich, his 5th symphony, my dad had it on a vinyl, obviously, and I found the slow movement. The slow movement was the music of a dawn at a carp lake, an unknown carp lake. It's a fabulous, very slow, quietly brooding piece with some lovely moments in it. And I listened to that for the first time when I went off carp fishing in 1964. And that music stays, whenever I hear it now, I'm back at Wood Hill Lake.
Yeah.
It's near Betchworth, which is still an unknown place. And I hope. And I had the whole place to myself, and it was a magic. I didn't catch anything, but it was a great day, mainly because of the music. And music accompanies me everywhere, because whenever I find something new, a hen harrier's got its own soundtrack.
Tune, yeah.
Edmund Finnis, an English composer. Edmund Finnis is the composer for the hen harrier. He doesn't know that. I know that. The music is the music of a slightly ethereal, ghost-like bird floating over a meadow looking for voles, listening as much as looking. That's Edmund Finnis. So all this music I have accompanies my wanderings. I don't take it with me, but I take it with me in my head. But it definitely accompanies me when I'm writing. I write to the music. I have to write to that music. If the music's not going, the writing's not going. It has to fit them. So all the books you ever read, I have music that's been specially chosen. It could be, but it's always someone like Bela Bartok was a Hungarian composer. He wrote 6 absolute masterpieces. The string quartets, all 6 are masterpieces. String quartet number 4 or number 5. No, number 5 is the music. The 3rd or 4th movement, I can't remember which one it is now. Is the vision of a carp just going through the reflections of a tree, just below the surface, and you're watching it through the reflections. That's how I heard the music that day. First time I saw that vision. Shortly afterwards, every time I hear that music, that carp is going through the reflections of that tree from a lake that we never ever caught a carp from. They were uncatchable, and that's why it was so magical. So this music this is why drum and bass. No. Country and Western, definitely not.
No. Fair, I'll give you that.
And yet, I do listen. My William, for instance, he can come up with an incredible jazz riff.
Yeah,
he just comes out of nowhere, and it's sort of like some of his sort of almost like carnival music, but it's like carnival, but also it's like medieval, and it's I love music to come from an unexpected direction. But don't get me going on drum and bass.
Good answer. The best answer I've had in that. One venue, one method, one species.
One venue, one method, one species. I would say, I'd say the river, the upper river Stour, float fishing with a worm for perch.
Nice. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Don't think about it too much, but feel it. As long as you're feeling it, you're doing it right.
Nice. Lakes or rivers?
Depends on the mood.
Depends on the mood.
Depends on my mood. Yeah.
I'll give you that. 3 famous people you take fishing. They could be past or present.
BB, Dennis Watkins Pitchford. BB, who wrote Confessions of a Carp Angler.
Yeah.
Dick Walker.
Yeah.
And Ted Hughes, who is one of my favourite poets. I read more poetry books than anything else. Again, like music, it's contemporary. But Ted Hughes wrote a fantastic poem called Pike. He also wrote a great. That's not what I like him. Why I like all his work. He also wrote a great book called River. A fabulous book. And it's to do with salmon fishing. I don't salmon fish. I don't have a great love of salmon fishing, but when he writes about it, it's a magical place, a magical thing to do. Ted Hughes, he did go carp fishing. I know he fished beachmere down in Devon.
Yeah,
he's been dead a long time now. Poor Ted. Well, not that long, maybe 20 years. But I'd like to have fished with him. I used to correspond with him sometimes.
Did you?
Yeah, he was. What was he? He was poet laureate at one stage. He was he was the Queen's choice of poet, which he didn't really agree with. He was very kind of. He was a bit like a Rod Hutchinson.
Was he?
I don't want to be. No, he wasn't. He was an intellectual as well, which Rod and I are not. But he was a great man, Ted Hughes. But I read a lot. That's where I get most of my writing ideas from
poetry.
Reading contemporary poetry. Suddenly a phrase will just jump out at me. God, that's a fantastic way of describing a tree in a big wind. It's saying something really original, which I'm never going to copy. That's not what I'm looking at. It's just a way of looking at things. It's a perception. The perception of a really good poet sharpens my perception. So it's,
Love it. Other than the Bishop, name 3 favourite history carp.
Favourite history? What, in my history?
Well, yeah.
My history. The 24-pounder off the dam.
Yes.
With Rod. Again, my first carp from Redmire without Rod. He was asleep. Yeah, my first carp from Redmire, that was big. And my first, I think my first carp from, they're all carp. I would have thought perch but no, a 12-pound barbel. Yeah, I caught a 12-pound barbel from a weir pool once at night when the moon was up, and that was a staggering fish.
Nice.
Great experience, yeah.
Final question, night out fishing or night in with the missus? Missus of your choice, this is, Chris.
Yes, I don't have a missus officially. But
officially?
Yeah.
There's a few scattered around the local area.
I would, when you're saying a night walk, I'll be out tonight. The
night walk,
the moon is
yeah?
big, yeah. So it's always a night out. I walk almost every night. So yeah, night out.
You are a night owl as well. 2 a.m. bedtimes, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Chris, I can honestly say that was everything I thought it was going to be and more, mate. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for listening and watching. I'll be back soon with another Nash Off the Hook podcast. Look out for this man's next book because hopefully he'll get it done this year. And thank you so much for your time. And the pigeon's back.
He's back. The pigeon's come back.
He knew.
He knew.
It's all about symmetry, isn't it, Chris?
That's it.
Thank you so much, mate.